Chapter 321, Exchange Agreement. Translator, Novel Saga Editor, Novel Saga. Shi Mu had been drawing magic charms over the past 3 months for the sake of his training. But, he hadn't just focused on the practice of the Book of Flaming Red Ape after this period had ended. He had also paid attention to his other practices. There was a small hilltop near the house that Shi Mu had recently bought. That hilltop was usually desolate and uninhabited. Therefore, Shi Mu would go to the hilltop every day early in the morning in order to practice the sun-swallowing art. In addition, he would go to the hilltop at night for the moon-swallowing art so long as the moon appeared in the sky. Shi Mu didn't have to draw magic charms during the daytime nowadays. So, he'd return to the underground cavern. Then, he'd activate the fire-filled array, and would start the practice of the 9th stage of the Book of Flaming Red Ape. Time flew, and half a year of time passed in an instant. At night, on the peak of the small hill, Shi Mu sat down with his legs crossed, and exhibited the posture of the moon-swallowing art. A virtual shadow of a full moon vaguely appeared behind his head. Then, the moonlight started to sprinkle down. It then integrated into the virtual shadow of the full moon. It couldn't be said how much time had passed in this way when Shi Mu's body suddenly revealed a little movement. And, the shadow of the full moon behind his head dissipated. He opened his eyes, and a glint of gladness peeped through them. The moonlight crystal grain condensed in his mind had already become much larger than before. In fact, it was almost the size of a baby's fist now. Shi Mu took a deep breath, and closed his eyes again. Then, a wisp of his magic power rushed into his mind, and touched the moonlight crystal grain. Bang! The crystal grain ruptured into pieces with a loud rumbling sound. Then, it took the shape of a full moon, and started to infuse the purest form of magic power into his body. After that, a cloud of stars emerged on the top of Shi Mu's head. 3 star-like patterns were twinkling in the cloud, while the 4th star looked as gloomy as before. The cloud of stars suddenly tumbled, and the 4th star's light gradually started to grow brighter due to the constant infusion of magic power. Then, a droning sound echoed. The cloud of stars revealed a burst of surging movement. And, the 4th star finally ceased to brighten after it reached a semi-bright state. Shi Mu opened his eyes, and his face exposed both delighted and anxious expressions at the same time. He noticed that his art of accumulating spirit power had marked a considerable progress during the time when his crystal grain had changed into the shape of a full moon. However, he still needed to spend at least 1 or 2 years of time to ascend to the rank of a 4-star magician. Suddenly, a dense cloud of fog floated behind him. The fog gradually settled, and Yan Luo's silhouette came into appearance. Its entire body was covered with silver armor. It stepped out, and walked over to Shi Mu. Yan Luo. A glimmer of joy shone in Shi Mu's eyes as he saw Yan Luo before him. Yan Luo's armor was apparently different than its previous one. There were circles of strange patterns on the surface of its armor this time. Also, a few sharp bone splinters could be seen on both shoulders of the armor. Moreover, an electric light was flickering on the top of those bone splinters. Yan Luo's strength seemed to have made a substantial progress since its last appearance. Also, the soul flames in its eyes looked almost deep purple in color this time. Well, you seem to be getting there. Yan Luo took a look at Shi Mu from top to bottom. Then, a sweet voice resounded in Shi Mu's mind. Shi Mu's facial expression stagnated when he heard these words. His practicing speed had been incredibly fast in the eyes of ordinary people. But, it didn't have any value in Yan Luo's eyes. He let out a soft sigh and asked, "Have you come to borrow something again?" "Yes, lend me your stick again." The soul flame in its eyes flickered, and it said with a nod. Shi Mu didn't say anything. He took down the black stick from his back, and handed it over to Yan Luo. Yan Luo waved the short stick once. Then, it turned its head to look at Shi Mu, and asked, "Is there no supplement for spirit energy? I'm trapped in this city these days. And, I can only draw magic charms to earn spirit stones. I'm barely able to support my own practice. So, having surplus spirit stones to replenish the spirit energy of this stick is out of question at this point of time. Shi Mu secretly rolled his eyes as he said. Don't be wordy. Give me 5,000 spirit stones. Yan Luo paid no attention to Shi Mu's words. Instead, it extended its arm in front of Shi Mu. You'd better come with something that you can exchange for the spirit stones. Shi Mu folded his arms across his chest and replied. What do you want? Yan Luo asked. I want the same green flower from last time. In fact, it would be better if we make an agreement for our future dealings, one green flower in exchange for 5,000 spirit stones. How about this? Shi Mu replied without any hesitation. Yan Luo remained silent for a moment, it seemed as if it was considering this. 10,000 spirit stones for one flower, Yan Luo haggled over the price. That's settled then. Shi Mu agreed without any hesitation. But, a crafty look flashed across his eyes at the same time. The value of that kind of green flower was definitely more than 10,000 spirit stones. So, the deal that he had just cracked was undoubtedly a favorable one. Yan Luo nodded, and a plume of black smoke bubbled up on its body. This indicated that it was about to return to its own world. But then, its actions suddenly stopped, and it shot a dubious look at Shi Mu. What's wrong? Shi Mu asked. Yan Luo walked over, and moved around Shi Mu once. Then, it extended its head, and sniffed at Shi Mu's body. What happened? Shi Mu frowned as he asked. There seems to be a special deathly aura around your body? Have you come across anything weird of late? Yan Luo asked. Shi Mu was left dumbfounded for a moment. But then, a ray of miraculous light flashed across his mind. Oh, that's right, it would have slipped my mind if you hadn't mentioned it. I think it should be this thing. He waved his hand, and a white skeleton appeared in front of him. Then, it heavily crashed to the ground with a thud sound. It was the same skeleton that Shi Mu had collected from the underground cave. The soul flame in Yan Luo's eyes slightly brightened as its eyes fell on the skeleton. It raised its hand, and a beam of grey light flew out of its hand. Then, that light beam lifted the white skeleton, and held it in front of Yan Luo. Yan Luo examined the skeleton in a careful manner, and the soul flame in its eyes grew even brighter. As if it was somewhat delighted. I had incidentally obtained this thing. This skeleton is somewhat special. It might turn out to be useful to you. I'll give it to you if you like it, Shi Mu said. Yan Luo didn't give him any reply. It instead opened its mouth, and spouted a wisp of purple flame. The flame flew straight into the skeleton's head. A light flashed in the hollow eye sockets of the skeleton the next moment. Then, a cluster of soul flames emerged in its eye sockets, they were sky blue in color. The skeleton's body quivered as soon as the soul flame ignited in its eye sockets. Then, the skeleton swept its vision around in a dull manner after a while. After that, its joints made a caw-caw sound as it tried to move its stiff hands and feet. The distinctive aura of a dead spirit creature also emerged on the white skeleton's body. And, this unique aura began to grow in an unceasing manner. It eventually stabilized after some time, somewhere between the middle and the advanced stage of the Xian Tian realm. It didn't undergo any change afterwards. Shi Mu was stunned to see the things that had happened before his eyes. A few gestures of Yan Luo had turned a skeleton into a dead spirit creature. On top of that, that skeleton's strength had ascended to the rank of a Xian Tian warrior in a matter of seconds. This entire scene was indeed very appalling to behold. Yan Luo is perhaps somehow related to this human skeleton. Such a thought popped into Shi Mu's mind. The human skeleton took a look at the surrounding area. And, its eyes fell on Yan Luo after a moment. The blue soul flames in its eyes flickered, and the expression in its eyes got replaced by a cordial look. The skeleton then half knelt on the ground, and bowed to Yan Luo. Then, it uttered a droning sound, "Master! Get up! You'll be with me from now on." "Well, I need to find a name for you," Yan Luo said. Then, the soul flames in its eyes leapt as if it had sunk into a deep consideration. Yan Luo thought about it for a while, but it apparently couldn't come up with any good name. Therefore, it turned its head, and looked at Shi Mu who stood nearby. You'd better choose a name for it yourself since I have turned it over to you, Shi Mu beckoned with his hand as he said. Master, I have a name, I'm called Wu Ye. The white human skeleton said in a slurred and indistinct voice. But, it was still able to express its meaning. Fine, you'll be called Wu Ye then. Yan Luo nodded. Then, a mass of black smoke welled up from its body, and caused a little fluctuation in the void. It then took a step, and went in like a wave. The white human skeleton also followed it, and walked in. I'll try to get you the green flower in a few days. Meanwhile, you try to prepare the required number of spirit stones. Yan Luo's voice resounded in Shi Mu's mind before the disappearance of the fluctuation in the void. Shi Mu creased into a smile as he heard these words. He knew that his magic power cultivation was only a short distance away from reaching the 4-star magician realm if he had those green flowers for supplements. In fact, he could achieve this realm in a matter of a few days with the help of those green flowers. As for the spirit stones, he still had some at his disposal. Shi Mu had set the conditions with Yan Luo. So, all he needed to do now was to spend more time in refining magic charms that could meet the requirement of the opposite party. The fact was that Shi Mu had been anxious about Yan Luo's constant ignorance towards him for some time. But, Yan Luo had just come to look for him of its own accord. So, Shi Mu had been able to deal with it in a better way. Such thoughts tumbled in Shi Mu's mind for a moment. Then, he flew towards his dwelling place like a flash of light. Time rolled on, and it seemed as if 3 months had passed in a flash. The dead spirit world. A chill black wind whistled across a huge black mountain peak while issuing a ghost cry-like sound. 2 legions of dead spirit creatures were absorbed in a close-range combat on a leveled slope halfway up the mountain peak. One side was almost dominated by a large number of human skeletons, while the other side was mainly comprised of various carrion carcass-type creatures. However, both sides had an almost equal number of members. The legion of the human skeletons was headed by a lofty and white skeleton soldier. A pair of deep blue soul flames was twinkling in its eye sockets at the moment. It held a large white sword in its hand. This sword was almost the same size as its body. The white skeleton soldier seemed to possess incredible strength. It would set off a white sword shadow every time it brandished its big sword. And, that sword shadow was dangerous enough to cut 1 or 2 approaching dead spirit creatures of the opposite party into 2 segments. The Skeleton Legion gradually gained the upper hand in this battle under the leadership of the white skeleton soldier. However, the white skeleton's focus seemed somewhat distracted from the current battle since it was often directing its vision toward the air. There was a slender white armored silhouette in midair. It held a short stick in its hand, and was in a tangle with a massive black carcass dog at the moment. This slender silhouette was none other than Yan Luo. Its body had again undergone some changes over these months. A pair of broad bone wings had sprouted on its back during this period. The bone wings appeared to be made of a translucent membrane-like thing. Its wings flashed, and it moved in the air with great speed and agility. As for the black carcass dog, there was a pair of long and thick curved horns on the top of its head. They were conical in shape, and bore a great similarity to those of a sheep. The carcass dog was 200 or 300 feet in size. A pair of deep purple soul flames could be seen flickering in its eyes at the moment. In addition, there was a cloud of grey smoke underneath its body. It had supported its body, and had made it hover in the air conveniently. The carcass dog was exuding exceedingly formidable aura. It was so strong that it had far surpassed Yan Luo's overwhelming aura. The deep purple soul flame in the black carcass dog's eyes radiated magnificent brilliance at this moment. Then, its massive body sprang forward, and swooped straight toward Yan Luo. Yan Luo's movement halted as it saw the scene. But, it remained standing there completely motionless, as if it didn't want to dodge the attack. The black carcass dog was overjoyed to see this. A layer of an intense black radiance emerged on one of its big front claws, and it made a gesture in the void that made it seem as if it wanted to grab Yan Luo. A chi-chi sound was heard, and the expansive black radiance condensed into an enormous shadow of a black palm. Then, the palm shadow moved to grasp Yan Luo. However, a splendid black radiance burst forth on the surface of the black stick in Yan Luo's hand. The stick then exuded a piercing sound like a fierce beast's scream. Then, a huge mass of black light emerged, and condensed into a bulky shadow of a black stick. That black stick shadow then pounded forward to shoot down the massive palm shadow. A loud bang sound rang out in the air. The big black palm shadow collapsed and dispersed like a piece of cloth. However, the momentum of the black stick shadow didn't reduce a bit. Instead, it dashed forward, and pounded toward the black carcass dog. The carcass dog's face finally revealed a terrified look. But then, a dazzling black radiance emerged on the two black horns on its head, and the carcass dog stuck them out to receive the black stick shadow. Ka-cha! The carcass dog's horns were crushed to small pieces as the stick shadow pounded on the dog's head. And, the carcass dog's head burst open like a rotten watermelon. Then, its massive body fell down like a meteor, and crashed into the carrion army below. Chapter 322, Major Enhancement in Strength. Translator, Novel Saga Editor, Novel Saga. 2 months later. Yan Luo stood opposite to a gigantic golden bone serpent near a vast pool of water. There was a distance of 1,000 feet between them. The soul flames in Yan Luo's eyes had a distinct deep purple glint now. They looked nimble, and were blazing in a magnificent manner. However, the formidable spiritual aura around the bone serpent was clearly far beyond Yan Luo's. It seemed that the bone serpent was very close to the boundary of the heaven rank. It was the Golden Bone Serpent King. It was regarded as the most powerful existence among the beast skeleton class creatures in the dead spirit world. However, the Serpent King still couldn't help revealing a trace of fear in this confrontation. It lifted its head high up, and started to sweep its bulky tail on the ground in a crazy manner. Its massive tail would crush huge rocks to fragments wherever it passed. Each rock was almost the size of a small hill. And, the fragments of those rocks proliferated in all directions as a result. Yan Luo's body was thinner and smaller in comparison to the enormous body of the Serpent King. However, it stood in the distance, and was completely motionless at the moment. Yan Luo's army of human skeletons stood in the distance. This large and densely packed army had covered the surrounding area as far as the eye could see. However, none of them dared to approach these two individuals. The leader of this army was a huge white human skeleton. This skeleton was none other than Wu Ye, whom Yan Luo had previously obtained from Shi Mu. Some time passed. The Golden Bone Serpent King eventually lost its patience, and issued a soundless roar. Then, its massive body pounced straight toward Yan Luo in a manner that made it seem as if it was flying. It hadn't arrived yet. But, it opened its big mouth, and spewed out a thick beam of golden light. Then, a chi-chi-like shrill ear-piercing sound resounded as the golden light beam dashed forward. It twisted and distorted the surrounding void wherever it went. Yan Luo spread its bone wings, and soared high up in the sky as it saw this scene. However, who would have thought that the Serpent King's body would be so flexible? Its neck flung to move around, and made a very flexible turn. And the golden light beam changed its trajectory in a very gentle and nimble manner. Yan Luo was already too late to dodge this attack. Therefore, it ended up getting struck by the golden light beam head-on. And, its body tumbled, and was sent flying into the distance like a fallen leaf in the strong wind. The soul flame in the Serpent King's eyes showed a sudden leap at this moment. Apparently, it was also astounded to see that it had struck the opposite party successfully. The Serpent King was as fast as a gust of wind. So, it caught up with Yan Luo in an instant even though the latter had been sent flying. Then, it stretched open its big mouth, and it seemed as if it wanted to swallow down Yan Luo in one gulp. Yan Luo was still tumbling in the air by the impact. But then, a grey light burst forth on its body, and its body stabilized. Then, the black stick in its hand radiated black radiance. Yan Luo raised its arm, and gave it a sudden flick. It seemed as if the black stick had changed into a black bolt of lightning the next moment. It flashed, and then penetrated into the mouth of the Serpent King. It then darted from behind its head. A big hole was blown up in the head of the Serpent King with a loud bang sound. Even its soul flame was pierced by the short stick. It then dissipated with a loud sound as a result. After that, the massive body of the Serpent King crashed down, and broke into the pool below with a loud sound. The imposing aura around its body had vanished by now. Yan Luo slowly floated down from the air. A long crack could be seen in its silver armor at this time. In addition, its aura had seemingly dispersed by now. This indicated that it had suffered some severe injuries. It waved its hand. A black light beam shot back, and fell in its hand. It was the black short stick. In the distance, the legion of the human skeletons issued intermittent bursts of soundless acclamation since they had witnessed Yan Luo's victory. They had started to brandish their weapons out of excitement. They were dancing while waving their weapons with all their strength along with their leader Wu Yat. Half a month later, Yan Luo was absorbed in a hand-to-hand fight with a human skeleton in a dark desert. The human skeleton's entire body was purplish-golden in color, like a flash of lightning. The purplish-golden skeleton bore a great similarity to Yan Luo in terms of overall appearance. Its body was covered with a suit of exquisite armor as well. In addition, it also wore a purplish-golden crown on the top of its head. And, that crown was embedded with a multicolored gem. Furthermore, the soul flame in this purplish-golden skeleton was purple, and had a silky silver gleam in it. And, the aura around its body had a touch of the heaven rank's grandeur. This skeleton held a silver trident in its hand. This human skeleton could ascend to the realm of the human skeleton emperor realm if it were able to move a step further. One white and one purple light rushed in the air. Both of them were as quick as the flash of lightning. They would often bump into each other in midair, and set off bursts of loud sound. These sounds rather seemed like an explosion of a muffled thunder. Then, a loud explosive sound rang out. And, the two silhouettes suddenly separated from each other, and shot toward the rear. Meanwhile, a ray of grey light flashed on Yan Luo's body, and stabilized it. A few cracks could be seen in Yan Luo's silver armor. And, its bone wings had also suffered damage. In fact, more than half of them were gone by now. It appeared that they had been separated from its body by a fairly smooth incision. However, Yan Luo didn't seem to have sustained any severe injuries apart from this. The purplish-golden skeleton wasn't far on the opposite side. The soul flame in its eyes flickered at this moment. It seemed as if it was in an extremely infuriated state. The fact was that its silver trident had broken into two halves. The armor on his chest had also been shattered by the impact of the collision. All these things indicated that it had received a severe blow. Don't solely rely on your weapon's strength if you are truly a formidable warrior. You should instead try to compete with me with your true strength, the purplish-golden skeleton said. However, a dazzling black light burst out on the black stick in Yan Luo's hand. It seemed as if it had turned a deaf ear to the purplish-golden skeleton's proposal. That black light then surged up and proliferated in the surrounding area in the radius of hundreds of feet. Consequently, both Yan Luo and the purplish-golden skeleton were shrouded in a curtain of black light. The human skeleton's complexion changed. It was about to fly out of the scope of this black light when a silhouette flashed. It was Yan Luo. It had already pounced and appeared in front of the human skeleton. Then, Yan Luo's black stick pounded down toward it with a loud whistling sound. Bang! A series of loud sounds spread from the black light, and rang out one after another, like raindrops. Then, the black light slowly dissipated and revealed Yan Luo's silhouette. Its entire bone armor had been shattered. Also, its lower abdomen had been pierced by the already broken trident. In fact, that trident had penetrated through its body, and had stuck out of its back. As for the human skeleton, it lay on the ground at the moment. The short stick had pierced through its head, and had nailed it to the ground. Yan Luo grasped the silver trident that was thrust into its lower abdomen, and exerted its strength to pull it out of its body. Meanwhile, streaks of purple light departed from the human skeleton's body in quick succession, and scattered everywhere. Then, they started to drift away into the distance. Yan Luo opened its mouth, and issued a suction force. Consequently, the streaks of purple light flew back, and submerged in its mouth one after another. After that, Yan Luo's wounds started to heal at an astonishing speed. Even its shattered bone armor started to mend itself. All of Yan Luo's injuries had healed once it had absorbed the energy of the purplish-golden human skeleton's soul flame. Moreover, Yan Luo's spiritual aura had become much more vigorous after the absorption. Furthermore, the broken bone armor had returned to its original state. Even Yan Luo's bone wings had recovered their original shape. Yan Luo spread its wings, and flew into the distance speedily. It seemed as if it had transformed into a meteor. It then landed in the vicinity of a hillside after a short time. The white human skeleton Wu Ye had led the legion of dead spirit creatures here, and was waiting for Yan Luo. It saw Yan Luo, and hastened to greet it. "Let's go." Yan Luo waved its hand. Then, it took the lead, and walked in a certain direction. "Master, we've been rushing while slaughtering during this period of time. However, we have no idea where we are rushing towards." Wu Yi's body was covered with a suit of golden bone armor. And, a few golden lines could be seen on its big sword. Wu Ye had seemingly become much fiercer than before. In addition, Wu Ye had also started to speak in a very fluent manner after having passed through this period of adaptation. "We're going to get back something that belongs to me," Yan Luo spoke a sentence in a faint voice. After that, it continued to forge ahead in silence. The peaceful Sun City, on the summit of a small and barren hill. The moonlight was shimmering. It was illuminating the ground like the surface of water. Shi Mu sat cross-legged on the peak of this hill. The moonlight was showering down, and was integrating into his body. Cai stood on a rock nearby with a bored expression on his face. His head was often tilting to one side as if a spell of drowsiness had been cast on him. There was a cloud of stars on the top of Shi Mu's head at the moment. It flickered, and 5 stars glistened with a sparkling brilliance. Simultaneously, they emitted a powerful magic power wave. Shi Mu opened his eyes after a long time, and 2 cold lights flickered in them. He stood up, and read an incantation in a loud voice. A cloud of red fire bubbled up in the air in response. It was over 100 feet in size. It appeared, and shrouded another small mountain peak completely. This peak was not far from his peak. The air in the vicinity started to feel scorching hot as the surrounding temperature made an alarming jump. Suddenly, a light flashed in the cloud of stars behind Shi Mu's head. Then, a faint light darted out of it, and merged into the cloud of fire. The cloud of fire revealed a sudden surge in response. Then, a red light flashed. And, a series of rocks curled up in flames started to shower down from the clouds, and bombarded the hilltop. Each rock was almost 1 foot in size. Consequently, a series of muffled thunderous sounds rang out for a moment. And then, the fragments of rocks dispersed in all directions. They were mixed with fire. The dark clouds dispersed in the air after a few moments. The summit of that small hill had been smashed to half by the impact of the bombardment. Layers of raging flames and plumes of smoke were billowing from all around. Wow, such incredible power! This meteoric fire rain truly deserves to be called a high-ranked fire attribute magic art. Moreover, it appears that you've almost grasped it. Cai had sobered up some time ago. A string of appreciation began to flow from his mouth when he saw this scene. A glint of contented look bloomed on Shi Mu's face. Shi Mu's art of accumulating spirit power had made a stunning advancement during the period of moon-swallowing arts practice. In addition, he also had Yan Luo's green flowers to draw support from during this period, and that had also allowed him make a noteworthy feat. He had reached the peak of the 14th stage of this art, and was merely a step away from breaking through the 15th stage. Moreover, the whirlpool of magic power in his lower abdomen had become almost the same as his chi palace. And, it was slowly getting thicker and more vigorous with the passing time. In addition, he had gotten very close to 6 degrees in fire attribute element induction force now. Therefore, he was able to learn the high-ranked fire attribute magic arts with great ease now. This meteoric fire rain was one of the high-ranked fire attribute magic arts recorded in the Fundamental Book of Fire. This art had indeed displayed a magnificent might when it was cast a moment ago. Shi Mu closed his eyes, and adjusted his breath for a few moments. He then opened his eyes, and waved one hand. Dozens of magic charms floated in front of him out of nowhere in response. Shi Mu's eyes were slightly open, and were revealing his pupils which seemed to be smeared with a layer of fluorescent light. Suddenly, a little fluctuation occurred in the void, and dozens of intangible chains flew out of Shi Mu's body. Then, the other ends of these chains got attached to those magic charms. Suddenly, it started to seem as if these magic charms were being pulled by some kind of invisible hands. They suddenly scattered all over the sky, as if the goddess of the sky had showered flowers below in a manner that could dazzle anyone's eyes. Shi Mu focused his eyes, and pointed out one of his fingers. The magic charms that were fluttering all over the sky flew down toward the small hill in succession. It was the same hill that had been paired by the previous bombardment. Then, they stuck on the surface of the hill. Boom! Dozens of magic charms were triggered at the same time. Dazzling lights of all kinds of magic arts gushed out, and shrouded the entire peak of the hill. Then, they all blew up at once. A loud explosive sound rang out. Then, innumerable gravels and layers of soil proliferated in all directions. The explosion also raised billowing chi waves everywhere. The greater part of the hundreds of feet high small hill had vanished into thin air in an instant by the impact of this explosion. Also, the surrounding soil had burnt, and become even darker. This explosion had even set off a storm in the surrounding. Shi Mu's clothes were fluttering, and were issuing intense sound in the raging wind. As for Shi Mu, his face was sparkling with overwhelming happiness at the moment. The might of his spirit sense had increased by a big margin along with the advancement of his art of accumulating spirit power. In addition, Shi Mu could also branch out a total of 32 soul control chains after having practiced to the 5th stage of transcending heaven imperial spirit determination. He had recently comprehended the technique to use the magic controlling spirit chain to control magic charms attack. The magic charms Shi Mu had just released were merely the primary ranked magic charms. But, let's presume that they were replaced by the middle-ranked magic charms. Even an Earth-ranked middle-stage powerhouse might have failed to receive the attack if 32 magic charms had detonated and attacked at the same time. Furthermore, even an Earth-ranked advanced stage powerhouse might have failed to resist the attack to a good effect if those middle-ranked magic charms were mixed with a few high-ranked magic charms. Consequently, even an advanced stage Earth-ranked warrior would have sustained serious injuries. Shi Tou, you've produced an extremely loud sound just now. It's difficult to say that no one will happen to notice it even though you've laid out a barrier near this mountain peak. Besides, the sky is getting brighter now. You should leave this place. Cai flew over from somewhere at this moment, and landed on his shoulder. He then looked around and said. Shi Mu nodded. He then walked down the mountain peak almost instantaneously, and returned to his residence soon after. Chapter 323, City Lord's Entrustment. Translator, Novel Saga Editor, Novel Saga. Shi Mu reached his house after some time. Then, he walked straight toward one of the rooms of this house. That room was the place where he had been drawing magic charms since the beginning. Shi Tou, we've spent more than a year in this city. And, I have to say that it's too boring to stay in this place all day long. Don't you have the confidence that you can escape in case we bump into Ao Kuei with your current level of strength? Cai grumbled. It's not possible. I might be able to cope with an ordinary Earth-ranked middle-stage powerhouse with my current strength. But, a confrontation with an Earth-ranked advanced stage powerhouse is out of question. Moreover, Ao Kuei is said to be the chief of his tribe. And, he ought to have a trump card at his disposal. So, I'm not sure if I can run away from him, Shi Mu replied. But, it would be possible if Boss Yan Luo agreed to offer a helping hand to you, Cai said. Don't overthink it. Keep a close watch on the surrounding area instead, and let me know if you find anything strange, Shi Mu said as he walked towards the charms room. So how long are we going to stay here? Cai looked dejected as he said. The city's lord should have already notified the higher authorities of the barbarian race about the situation outside the peaceful Sun City. Or, he would have come up with some strategies by now. The barbarians certainly won't allow such situation to prolong. After all, other demon beasts will start to follow suit if this news proliferated. And then, the situation might become even more detrimental to the barbarians, Shi Mu replied. I'll go if this is the case, Cai said. Then, he flapped his wings, and flew in the air. Shi Mu opened the door of the charms room, and walked in. Yan Luo's demand for spirit stones was getting more and more frequent these days. And, it was estimated that Yan Luo would show up to collect spirit stones once again in the coming few days. Therefore, Shi Mu needed to be prepared in advance. However, he'd also be able to collect a lot of that strange green flower in his storage ring if this process continued. 2 days passed. Shi Mu left the residence at noon, and walked straight toward the shop of that dense-browed shopkeeper Ai La Mu. He watched the surrounding crowd as he walked on the street, and his brows creased. He noticed that many people had strange expressions on their faces. Also, they all seemed to be rushing toward public places like restaurants and so on. This hustle and bustle allowed him to assume that something must have happened. Shi Tou, don't you think these people look somewhat strange today? Cai had also noticed the strangeness in people's behavior. Something indeed seems a bit strange today, Shi Mu moved his head in a nod. Meanwhile, he had arrived in front of Ai La Mu's shop, which was built with a huge black boulder. I'm going to sell these magic charms first. Meanwhile, you go and probe around. Try to find about this strange situation here, Shi Mu thought for a moment. Then, he said in a commanding tone. Leave this matter to me, Cai complied. Then, he flapped his wings, and flew away. After that, Shi Mu walked into the shop. Ai La Mu stood behind the sales counter at this time. Also, there were a few customers in the shop. They were moving around, and browsing through the stuff. Dear friend! Welcome to my shop. So, how may I help you? Shi Mu had barely set foot in the shop when Ai La Mu's eyes fell on him, and a glimmer of gladness flashed across his eyes. However, his attitude seemed half-hearted when he said, I have to buy a batch of demon beasts materials. I wonder if I'd get any special discount in the price since I need a large number of them, Shi Mu replied. No problem. Dear friend, please come to the side hall for a detailed discussion, Ai La Mu nodded, and asked the shop assistant to look after the business here. And, he himself walked into the hall with Shi Mu. The two men entered the side hall. Ai La Mu then waved his sleeves, and a dazzling white light shone on all 4 walls of the hall. Then, a white barrier spread out in response. Dear friend Mu, please sit down. Ai La Mu's facial expression had undergone a drastic change by now. The words that these two men had just exchanged were code words between them. This was to prevent others from sensing Shi Mu's identity. You don't have to be so courteous. These are the share of this time. Shi Mu took out a stack of magic charms, and passed it to the opposite party. Ai La Mu's face revealed a trace of happiness. He received the magic charms, and took a quick look at them. And, his face beamed with an even stronger sense of happiness. He saw that high-ranked magic charms were larger in number than the previous time. The price of a high-ranked magic charm was far higher than that of a middle-ranked magic charm. Consequently, even a small number of high-ranked magic charms could fetch a considerably huge profit. So, Shi Mu had switched to the high-ranked magic charms in order to earn plenty of spirit stones. It seems that friend Mu has indeed worked very hard, since I can see a large number of high-ranked magic charms this time. The price of all these magic charms should be 21,000 spirit stones as per our agreed rate, Ai La Mu said. Shi Mu gave him a nod, since he had already made a calculation in this regard. Dear friend Mu, please wait a moment, Ai La Mu said, and walked out of the hall. He soon returned with a small cloth bag in his hand, and handed it over to Shi Mu. Shi Mu swept his spirit sense over the cloth bag. He found a small pile of middle-rank spirit stones in it, and the quantity was just right. He received the cloth bag. Then, he bid Ai La Mu goodbye, and walked toward the door. Oh, by the way, the atmosphere in the city seems a bit odd today. Everyone seems to be in a hurry. Does the master of the shop know the reason behind this strange situation? Shi Mu's feet abruptly stopped as he asked. Oh, can it be that dear friend Mu hasn't heard anything about it? Ai La Mu revealed a surprised look when he heard his question. What did you hear? I've been working round the clock behind closed doors the past few days. In fact, I didn't step out of my house during this period, Shi Mu replied. It's not surprising to hear this. As a matter of fact, there was a rumor floating in the city today. Ao Kuei had been lurking around outside the city for over a year. However, it is being said that he had suddenly disappeared without a trace a few days ago, Ai La Mu explained. Is it true? Shi Mu was left stunned for a moment. I don't dare to make a presumptuous judgment under specific circumstances. However, it is reported that the city's lord, Yukin, had sent someone to explore outside the city. And it seems that the said individual didn't find Ao Kuei's trace anywhere, Ai La Mu replied. That's good news, Shi Mu couldn't help revealing the trace of a delighted look as he heard this news. Does friend Mu also intend to go out of the city? Ai La Mu asked, since he had noticed the change in Shi Mu's facial expression. Yes, I've stayed in this city for too long. I should leave now, Shi Mu nodded. Then, dear friend, take proper care of yourself. Also, don't forget to drop by your old friend if you get a chance to pass by peaceful Sun City sometime again. Ai La Mu's voice was filled with regret when he said these words. The fact was that Shi Mu had made a decision to stay here due to Ao Kuei's besiege. Otherwise, he might not have been able to stay in this small city for so long if he couldn't make accomplishments with the help of his charm-making skill. And, Ai La Mu knew that he couldn't continue this business once Shi Mu left the city. However, Ai La Mu had made a good wealth during this period of time. He had been able to grasp a footing in this city, and had made his business flourish with each passing day. And, this was only because he was a contented person. Oh, I'll definitely come to see my old friend if I ever get a chance to visit this city again. After all, we still have an opportunity to work together, Shi Mu smiled as he said. The two men exchanged a few words for some time. Then, Shi Mu hurried out of the shop. Shi Tou, I've found out great news. Try to guess it. Shi Mu had hardly left the shop when Cai flew over, and landed on his shoulder. Cai then exclaimed. I've already heard this news. It's related to Ao Kuei's disappearance, right? Shi Mu said. That's right. In addition, a large number of people who were confined in the city like us are forming groups. This is because they want to go out of this city together. We might as well seize this opportunity to leave this place. After all, I'm suffocated after staying here for so long. Cai appeared very excited when he said. Shi Mu heard Cai's words, and his face got smeared with an irresolute look. He then said after a little consideration, I'm still circumspect about this information. It can't be said with full guarantee that Ao Kuei has left. Let's investigate this matter before further discussion. Shi Mu said, and advanced in the direction of the Heavenly Wu Gems Pavilion. Heavenly Wu Gems Pavilion was regarded as a well-informed entity in this city. So, it might have received a clearer picture of this situation. Shi Mu reached the Heavenly Wu Gems Pavilion after having a conversation with Ai La Mu. However, the Heavenly Wu Gems Pavilion had also welcomed 2 other special visitors in their store at the same time. A few people were seated in a side hall along with the 2 respected visitors at the moment. This hall was located in the middle of the store. One of them was tall. He had a pair of white eyebrows that stood erect. He was an old man who was clad in a green gown. He was seated upright on the seat of honor, and Manager Shi stood behind him with a respectful expression on his face. He was the same person who had entertained Shi Mu during his previous visit. The spiritual aura that this green-robed old man was exuding was grand and steady. He was undoubtedly an earth-ranked powerhouse. 2 other people were seated on the left-hand side of the seat of honor. One of them was a majestic middle-aged man who wore a purplish golden crown on his head. He was none other than Yukan, the lord of the peaceful Sun City. And, the other person was a gorgeous young woman. She was dressed in a grey skirt, and was seated next to Yukan. She was obviously the Dark Moon cult's Pang Yu. She had been dispatched by the cult to peaceful Sun City's sub-altar to serve as the altar lord. Hehe, City Lord Yu and Altar Lord Pang have graced our store with their presence at the same time. This has left this old man to feel deeply honored, the green-robed old man said. Elder Wu is so kind to us. Both of us have come here to have a long talk with you. First of all, we'd like to express our gratitude to Elder Wu. Ao Kuei was lingering outside the city for so long, but he has finally left. It should be the skillful move of your respected Chamber of Commerce, right? Yukan's eyes glimmered as he said with a smiling face. City Lord Yukan is overpraising us. My Heavenly Wu Chamber of Commerce is just an ordinary Chamber of Commerce of the Western continent. The only thing we do here is carry out business transactions in an efficient manner. There is no way that we could have such great abilities, the green-robed old man replied without batting an eyelid. Yukan smiled, and didn't continue to intertwine this matter. He then continued with a solemn look on his face, as for the other matter, it can be said that we had thought about it over and over, and eventually arrived at a conclusion. The fact is that we have no other choice but to request the Heavenly Wu Chamber of Commerce for a favor. City Lord Yu, please tell me, the green-robed old man exchanged a glance with Manager Shi before he responded. I want to entrust the Heavenly Wu Chamber of Commerce to deliver a batch of things to the City Lord of the Rising Sun City, Yukan said. Rising Sun City? Isn't it a big city of the barbarians which is about 20,000 miles westward? The green-robed old man asked. Yes, it is, Yukan nodded. Let's presume that Ao Kuei has left. However, he must have assigned another earth-ranked powerhouse of his tribe to control the demon beasts that are still positioned outside the city. So, we are still unable to ensure complete safety outside the city, the green-robed old man said after a momentary hesitation. Elder Wu is very modest. You only need to show a business card with the Heavenly Wu Chamber of Commerce's name on it. There's hardly anyone in the entire Western continent who would dare to disrespect your Chamber of Commerce. It doesn't matter how the situation is outside the city. Ao Kuei isn't necessarily going to offend the Heavenly Wu Chamber of Commerce for this matter, Yukan said. The green-robed old man didn't speak. He simply gazed at Yukan in a cold and calm manner. Elder Wu can feel relieved when it comes to the compensation for this task. We will surely satisfy you, Yukan continued. May I dare to ask City Lord something? What do you wish to send to the Rising Sun City? The green-robed old man thought of something for a moment. Then, he asked. This is the list of goods. Elder Wu, please take a look at it. A blue light flashed in Yukan's hand while he spoke. Then, a jade slip appeared in the hand, and he handed it over to the Elder Wu. Elder Wu received it, and poured a wisp of his spirit sense into it in order to explore it. Then, his white eyebrows slightly creased as if he was emotionally moved by something. All right, this matter will be taken care by the Heavenly Wu Chamber of Commerce. The green-robed old man gave him a nod after a little consideration. Well, I'm leaving this in your care, Elder Wu. Oh, by the way, dear friend Peng Yu also has some stuff that she wants to send. I'd like to request the Chamber of Commerce to undertake this task as well. Yu Kan's gaze shifted to Peng Yu while he said this. That's right. This humble woman has just a few things that she wants to entrust to the Chamber of Commerce with. I want these things to be delivered to a small town in the vicinity of the Rising Sun City. This is the list of items and escort rewards. Please take a look at it, Elder Wu. Peng Yu also took out a jade slip, and passed it to the green-robed old man. Chapter 324, Enlists. Translator, Novel Saga Editor, Novel Saga. The green-robed old man stretched out his hand, and took Peng Yu's jade slip. He then infused a wisp of his spirit sense into it, and explored it. Then, he put down the jade slip, and nodded. It was like carrying out a small task on the way. But, he was still being offered compensation for both tasks separately. So, he obviously had no objection to this request. In addition, the things that Peng Yu had requested them to deliver weren't large in quantity. But, the reward for undertaking this task was relatively high. Then, we'll leave everything in your care, Elder Wu. Those things will need a few days of time for proper preparation. I think they can embark on this journey in 10 days or so. Afterwards, everything will be in your sincere care. Yu Kan clasped his hand as a sign of respect, and said in a reverent manner. Then, Yu Kan and Peng Yu bid him farewell and departed. After that, only 2 men remained in that living room, the green-robed old man and the manager. You go through this list of items, and get them prepared within a few days. The green-robed old man passed the 2 jade slips to the manager. Manager Shi received the jade slips, and made a brief exploration. His brows slightly creased in response, and he said, Elder Wu, the number of things that Peng Yu has requested us to deliver is reasonable. But, the worth of the resources City Lord Yu Kan has entrusted us with is considerably high, Manager Shi said. Feel free to speak everything frankly if there's something on your mind, the green-robed old man said. As far as I know, there's nothing to be anxious about. Most of the areas that'll come on the way from Peaceful Sun City to the Rising Sun City. However, we'll have to pass through the Crying Crane mountain ranges on the way. Those ranges are situated in the eastern region. And, that place falls in the territory of the Crane's Wing tribe, which is a vicious barbarians tribe. It is said that the neighboring area has been occupied by many ferocious demon beasts which are adept at flying. And, they often plunder the caravans that pass through their territory. It's practically impossible to guard against them. Besides, our strength in the Peaceful Sun City is already limited. So, I'm afraid that, Manager Shi's voice was permeated with sincere concern when he spoke. You don't have to worry about this matter. As far as I know, the Chamber of Commerce has recently transferred a high-ranked official guest to serve in the nearby city. He is a full moon-ranked magician. I'll later report this matter to the headquarters. In addition, I'll invite the elder guest official to come, and take charge of this mission. Also, you are instructed to go and make an announcement in the city for the recruitment of 40 Xian-Tian-ranked totem warriors or star-ranked magicians. These people will be offered generous rewards as long as this escorting mission turns out successful. Each person will be rewarded with 1,000 spirit stones, the green-robed old man instructed Manager Shi. Yes. Manager Shi complied without hesitation. Then, this matter is handed over to you. Make a good preparation to ensure absolute safety, the green-robed old man nodded. He then stood up, and walked towards the depth of the living room. Manager Shi stood in the same place for a moment in order to consider something. Then, he arrived by the side of a desk in the room. He then turned his hand, and fished out a roll of paper. Then, he took a pen, and started to write on the paper at a very quick pace. He stopped writing after a moment. Then, he clapped his hand, and shouted something toward the door. Then, a blue-robed man pushed open the door, and walked in. Post this notice outside the office of the city lord. Also, set up a booth to accept the registrations, Manager Shi said as he passed the paper to him. Yes, the blue-robed man complied, and took the paper. Then, he turned around to leave. Hold on, but then, Manager Shi called out to stop the blue-robed man. Does manager have any other instructions to give? Continue to accept registrations even if the number of applicants exceeds 40. But, don't forget to make an announcement that a small competition will be conducted after 3 days. The blue-robed man complied. He then turned around, and walked away. Manager Shi returned, and sat down on his chair. He then closed his eyes, and seemingly sank into contemplation. But then, the sound of footsteps spread from outside. Then, a man walked in. He was one of the shop assistants of the Heavenly Wu Gems Pavilion. Chi has come to report to Manager Shi. There is a man outside who calls himself Mu Shi. He wishes to meet you, the shop assistant reported. Mu Shi, an idea dawned upon Manager Shi's mind as Shi Mu's silhouette emerged in his mind. Invite him to the side hall, and serve him a cup of tea. Tell him that I'll be there in a little while. Manager Shi stood up, and walked out of the room. In Heavenly Wu Gems Pavilion's the side hall. Shi Mu picked up the teacup, and pursed his lips to take a sip. A few plates of delicious snacks were laid out on the tea table apart from the tea. And, Cai was gobbling them up merrily at the moment. Shi Mu couldn't help shaking his head when he looked at Cai's stupid and inattentive appearance. Then, a sound of footsteps was heard, and the door to the hall was pushed open. Then, Manager Shi walked in. Hee, I'm honored by dear friend Mu's gracious presence in our pavilion. I'm glad to see you again. Manager Shi was still far from Shi Mu when he clasped his hands, and said respectfully. Manager Shi is very polite. It's nice to meet you after so long. Shi Mu also greeted the opposite party in return. However, a feeling of suspicious had emerged in his mind at the same time. He had noticed that Manager Shi seemed to be overly warm and cordial to him this time. In fact, his approach was entirely different from the previous time. Dear friend Mu doesn't need to be suspicious about anything. My Heavenly Wu Chamber of Commerce always shows differential treatment to people with exceptional qualities. And, friend Mu is a rare prodigy in magic charms who can even make a high-ranked magic charm. Even Elder Wu of our pavilion never ceases to praise you for your abilities. Pardon me for I couldn't show due respect to you during our previous meeting, Manager Shi said. Shi Mu's facial expression changed. But, he regained his equanimity quickly. However, he couldn't shake off the apprehensive feeling that had just emerged in his heart on seeing the extraordinary intelligence-gathering capability of the Heavenly Wu Chamber of Commerce. It appeared that they hadn't left any stone unturned to gather this information. Manager Shi is overpraising me. I'm no better than an ordinary person. I just happen to know how to draw magic charms. An idea crossed Shi Mu's mind, and he said. Manager Shi showed a faint smile, and didn't try to dig into the details. He simply sat down on the chair next to Shi Mu and said, I wonder what brought friend Mu here this time. What's the matter? Can it be related to that girl, Zhongxiu? I'm afraid that I'll have to disappoint your excellency once again if that's the case. That's not the case. This Mu has shown up here to inquire about another important matter. This matter is related to the demon beasts outside the city. I wonder if the Honorable Chamber of Commerce knows anything in this regard. Is it true that Ao Kui has left? Shi Mu's brows creased, and he asked with a calm look as before. So, this is the case. Well, according to the floating rumor in the city, Ao Kui has indeed left peaceful Sun City, and is unlikely to return in the short term. However, he has assigned an earth-ranked powerhouse of his tribe to take command of the demon beasts outside the city in his place. The demon beasts are relatively relaxed outside the city these days. But, I'm afraid there will be some risks if you want to go out of the city. Manager Shi's words were accompanied by a chuckle. Shi Mu felt greatly relieved when he heard that Ao Kuei had truly left. The fact was that Shi Mu was only waiting for Ao Kuei's departure. He wouldn't be too worried even if there was another Earth-ranked demon beast outside the city, as long as this new one wasn't an advanced stage Earth-ranked warrior. Thank you so much for your precious help, Manager Shi. May I ask how many spirit stones are needed for this information? Shi Mu asked. This news isn't worth the money. It's only a matter of time until it spreads across the city. So, you don't have to pay for it, Manager Shi replied with a soft chuckle. Well then, I would like to thank Manager Shi again. There are still some things that I need to take care of. So, I'll take my leave now. Shi Mu cupped his hands across his chest in courtesy and said. He then stood up as he wanted to leave from here. Cai also stopped eating, and hurried over to Shi Mu's shoulder. Dear friend Mu, please wait a moment, Manager Shi's eyes flickered as he said. Does Manager Shi still have some business with me? Shi Mu's feet stopped, and he turned his head to look at him. Hehe, it's not an important matter. Friend Mu must be planning to leave the peaceful Sun City now, right? Manager Shi said. That's what I'm planning to do now, Shi Mu nodded. It's not safe outside the city at this time. I know that dear friend Mu is very formidable. But, it will still be difficult for you to escape if you bump into a demon beast, Manager Shi said. Manager Shi can speak his mind if he wants to say something, Shi Mu probed. The Chamber of Commerce is going to dispatch a batch of materials to the western part of the continent nearly 10 days later. And, this mission requires a group of guards to escort the goods. Brother Mu can go to take a look outside the city lord's office in case he's interested in it, Manager Shi said. May I know where your Chamber of Commerce wants to send these goods? Shi Mu asked. Rising Sun City, Manager Shi replied. Shi Mu's eyes flashed as if he had some impressions of this name. This city was a big barbarian city, and it was located in the depths of the western continent. It'll take at most 2 months from here to Rising Sun City. And, the reward for each accompanying escort is 1,000 spirit stones. Hehe, I think that the number of spirit stones might not have a significant impact on friend Mu. However, it will naturally be a lot safer to embark on a journey along with the caravan, Manager Shi stated. Well, I'll keep that in mind, Shi Mu nodded, and hurried out of the store with Cai. Shi Tou, are you planning on joining this group of escorts? Cai asked once they had departed from the Heavenly Wu Gems Pavilion. Let's go and see the situation before we discuss anything, Shi Mu said while walking in the direction of the city lord's office. A moment later, outside the city lord's office. Wow, there are a lot of people here, Cai screamed from afar. Shi Mu followed Cai's line of sight, and saw that there was indeed a notice hung high in the middle of the bulletin board. And, it was surrounded by a large number of people at the moment. Shi Mu walked in the direction of the crowd. Meanwhile, he focused his gaze, and read the contents of the notice at one glance. The notice contained the matter that Heavenly Wu Gems Pavilion wanted to recruit either Xian-Tian-ranked powerhouses or star-ranked magicians. There is a reward of 1,000 spirit stones for only 2 months, someone in the crowd exclaimed with excitement. Tisk tisk, this reward is very. Heavenly Wu Gems Pavilion is indeed rich and overbearing, many ordinary practitioners whispered in succession. I've heard that Ling Chu, the top military official of the city lord, will also participate in this mission. In addition, the Heavenly Wu Gems Pavilion is sending a moon-ranked expert to supervise this mission. But, they only have to deliver a batch of goods. So, why are they taking great pains, and offering big fees for a simple task? You are overthinking this matter. You're talking about only 2 people. Don't you think that it will be very difficult to carry out this escorting mission by depending on only 2 people? Besides, the demon beasts outside the city haven't disappeared altogether. Can one person safely depart from the peaceful Sun City on their own under these circumstances? Brother Zhao is a sensible person. But, we can still strive to get 1000 spirit stones. So, let's get our names registered right away. The notice also included eligibility criteria in terms of the level of cultivation. Therefore, only the people who met the requirements had gathered in front of the registration stage. And so, they were drawing a lot of envious eyes towards them. Shi Mu stayed in the crowd for a while since he wanted to weigh the situation before taking any decision. He now agreed with Manager Shi's words after he pondered over this matter. It was indeed better to go along with the Heavenly Wu Chamber of Commerce if he was already planning to leave the city and advance towards the west. It would certainly ensure his safety to a great extent as compared to setting out alone. The Rising Sun City was a big city of the barbarian race. Moreover, this journey would lead him to the western part of the continent. In fact, he would have to pass through this city even if he chose to set out alone. A string of such thoughts flashed across Shi Mu's mind for a moment. After that, he stepped forward, and walked up to the registration stage. There was already a large crowd of people around the stage. A blue-robed man shouted aloud at this moment, "There is first come first serve rule here. Hey, I'm talking to you. Don't push and cause trouble here. Come one by one for registration. Everyone will get the chance. Isn't the requirement of only 30 people? So many people are already here. How would we get a chance if we don't push our way to the stage?" Someone in the crowd asked for clarity. "KK, the escorting mission only requires 30 people. But, we've received a large number of applicants. So, in light of this, we will hold a small competition among the applicants for the sake of fairness. And, the winner will be able to participate." The crowd started to make a ruckus again as soon as they heard his reply. The competition is scheduled to be held after 3 days. And, the venue will be disclosed here tomorrow. So, everybody should go back, and prepare for the competition. 3 days later. The selection competition of the Heavenly Wu Gems Pavilion was about to begin soon. And, the venue was the martial arts practicing field which was located in the western part of the city. It was only a small competition, but all the participants were either Xian-Tian martial warriors or star-ranked magicians. So, this had obviously attracted the attention of many ordinary barbarians of the city. In fact, these spectators had begun to well up in order to watch the competition. Chapter 325, Facing Someone's Confession. Translator, Novel Saga Editor, Novel Saga. Shi Mu stood in a certain corner of the martial arts field at the moment. Cai was on his shoulder. He had suppressed his aura this entire time since he didn't wish to attract people's attention. From an outsider's point of view, he was currently no different from a martial warrior who had barely stepped into the Xian-Tian primary stage. Also, no one could sense his true strength unless the opposite party's spirit sense was far exceeding his own. The strength of his dual cultivation martial arts and magic arts along with the splendid power of his spirit sense allowed him to get an edge over the ordinary martial warriors. In addition, the practice of the art of accumulating spirit power and the transcending heaven imperial spirit determination had significantly contributed towards the enhancement of his spirit sense's power. Therefore, his spirit sense was now far more powerful than that of any earth-ranked primary stage warrior. But, it was slightly less powerful than that of a moon-ranked magician. However, Shi Mu couldn't cover up his overbearing and rebellious temperament. Consequently, many surrounding people cast sidelong glances at him. However, they soon exposed a contemptuous look, and retracted their gazes when they found out that his cultivation wasn't high. The registered participants started to arrive at the venue one after another as the time of the competition approached. Most of the participants were either middle stage or advanced stage Xian-Tian warriors. However, several star-ranked magicians were also part of this group. Manager Shi of the Heavenly Wu Gems Pavilion had been assigned to preside over this competition. He took a look at the sky. Then, he walked up to the stage which was located in the center of the martial arts practicing field. He coughed a little, and then began the announcement, "It's almost time. We can't wait." A sudden uproar broke out in the crowd at this moment. Then, a woman leapt forward in the martial arts field in a hurry. The woman was dressed in an orange dress which was perfectly highlighting the contour of her exquisite figure. Her pure white face looked slightly red at the moment. She had a pair of deep green and slender eyebrows, they looked like a willow leaf. A pair of large and limpid eyes could be seen below them. Her beautiful eyelashes looked like curtains. In addition, there was a hint of a distinct heroic aura around her that was adding charm to her mesmerizing beauty. This woman didn't wait for the surrounding people to recover from the trance. She gracefully clasped her hands toward Manager Shi, and said in a reverent manner, "I'm Lang Yutong. I'm sorry for being a little late today. Do I still have time?" Manager Shi looked at her, but didn't reply. He simply nodded. Then, he began to announce the rules. The total number of applicants that have registered for the selection of escorts is 85. But, only 78 people have marked their presence today. The outcome of the battle will be determined through drawing lots. There are altogether 40 matching numbers here. Those who draw out the same number will have a showdown here. And, the winners will become eligible to participate in this escort mission. The 39th and 40th numbers will be promoted directly. These words had barely faded when a wave of whispering and discussing sounds echoed in the field. But, nobody turned up with any objection in the end. "Well, everyone will start drawing lots in sequence now." Manager Shi waved his hand as he finished his words. Then, a blue-robed man beside him walked out, and placed an iron box in the center of the stage. There was a pile of sealed paper wraps in that box. Shi Mu also followed the crowd. He stretched out his hand, and picked up a paper wrap randomly. He was about to open the paper wrap when Cai's voice suddenly fell into his ears. "Shi Tou, I know that woman." Cai's big eyes went wide open, and he blustered loudly. "This is a public place. So, you give me little peace," Shi Mu responded. "I'm telling you the truth. Take a look at her quickly. She was the one who had thrown flirtatious glances at you on the street when we had barely entered this city," Cai shouted again. Simultaneously, he rubbed his wings against Shi Mu's neck. Shi Mu raised his head, and looked in that direction. He found that the woman that Cai was talking about was Lang Yutong. She had arrived late here. He thought about it several times, but couldn't remember when he had seen this woman. Meanwhile, Cai couldn't hold back. So, he flew over to Lang Yutong. "Hey, pretty lady, do you recognize me?" He hadn't even finished his words when his head received a smashing hit from Shi Mu. "What's this, Shi Tou? Why did you do this?" Cai shouted at him with displeasure. Lang Yutong was awestruck to see that a parrot with multicolored feathers was talking to her. But then, the corners of her mouth gradually curled as Shi Mu emerged beside her. "So, it's you." Lang Yutong was surprised and delighted at the same time. "You finally remembered. I have a good memory. I had recognized you even though you had a veil on your face the other day. We had parted ways that day. But, we've met again today. This is called fate." Cai started to blabber in an incessant manner. "So, this parrot is your spirit pet." She listened to Cai's non-stop blather, and found it very funny. She thought that Cai had been trained by Shi Mu. So, she shifted her gaze to Shi Mu and said so. "This domestic animal keeps on babbling nonsense all day long. And now, he has offended you. However, I still hope that the miss will forgive us." Shi Mu clasped his hand toward Lang Yutong and said. Then, he picked up Cai and left. "Shi Tou, Miss Lang is so pretty. How are you not tempted by her?" Cai had been dragged away by Shi Mu. But, he still didn't forget to add a few words. "Shut up." A smashing hit again fell on Cai's head. "Ouch, it hurts. Can't you hit me gently? You are a stone-hearted fella," Cai shouted in a resentful manner. A group of surrounding participants saw that Shi Mu and Lang Yutong were talking to each other in a manner that made it seem as if they were very close. And an askance look surfaced in their eyes. It was indeed very rare to see an extremely gorgeous woman like Lang Yutong in the barbarian race. In fact, there was hardly any woman in this peaceful Sun City who could compete with her intriguing beauty. On top of that, Lang Yutong was also a star-ranked magician. It could be sensed from the faint magic power waves her body was radiating. Therefore, the surrounding participants felt a sense of admiration for her in their hearts. A few Xiantian advanced stage warriors saw this, and also tried to strike up a conversation with her. They hadn't expected that she would give them the cold shoulder. Consequently, they couldn't remain calm, and exposed an expression of embarrassment on their faces. Then, they again struck a glance at Shi Mu, only to find that he was merely a young Xiantian primary stage warrior. And this realization filled their hearts with a sense of irresistible hatred for him. A boy who has just entered the Xiantian realm is thinking of fighting over a woman with us his seniors. It seems that he's tired of living, a tough and sturdy man blurted out. The people around him issued bursts of laughter in response. Brother Ji, even a man of your strength can't help but get angry when you look at that boy. Yeah, that boy is kind of arrogant. It ticks me off when I see him. However, Shi Mu acted as if he hadn't heard their words. He didn't even throw a glance at these people. He simply strode toward a blue-robed man, and gave his number to him. This action made people's hatred for him even stronger than before. The competition finally marked its beginning. The participants started to come forward in ascending order as per the rules. The small field bustled with people's noise and excitement in a matter of seconds. Someone would strike down the ring every now and then. Shi Mu had already found that his opponent was a martial warrior with the help of Cai's vision. That person had received number 18 just like he had. However, he had exchanged his number with that robust man surnamed Jia at the last moment. Shi Mu sneered in his heart on seeing this. But he still maintained his composure, and went to the ring. The man surnamed Jia swept a glance over a few supporters in the crowd, and burst into laughter. Then, he leapt onto the ring with a huge stick in his hand. That stick was covered with several sharp teeth like a wolf's fangs. Suddenly, a buzzing sound resounded in the crowd below the stage. The man surnamed Jia was a strong advanced stage Xiantian warrior. Therefore, the entire peaceful Sun City was scared of him. In fact, there were only a handful of people in the city who could be his match. On the other hand, his opponent Shi Mu had never been seen before in the city. Moreover, he was merely at the Xiantian primary stage. Therefore, everyone thought of him as a worthless and anonymous pawn. Only Lang Yutong was unable to take her eyes off the stage. In fact, her eyes were smeared with a hint of curiosity. It seemed that she couldn't wait to watch the showdown. She had just defeated her opponent, and had qualified for this escort mission without a hitch by doing so. But, it seemed that she wasn't particularly happy with her attainment. Boy, I'd like to give you a chance. Allow your senior to use only 3 head-smashing moves on you here. And, I promise you that I won't hit you severely. The man surnamed Jia struck a contemptuous look at Shi Mu as he said. Such words sparked off a burst of laughter in the crowd. Are you done? Shi Mu responded in an unhurried manner while examining his right hand's fist. You have courted death. The man surnamed Jia gave a loud shout, and a green light flashed on his body. Then, the light surged rapidly, and enveloped the wolf-toothed gigantic stick in his hand with a mass of green light. He then hacked his stick toward Shi Mu with full force. A Xiantian advanced stage oppressive force swept across the audience, and galloped straight toward Shi Mu the next moment. Boom! A loud and explosive sound rang out. Shi Mu's silhouette dispersed into the air the moment he was struck by the mass of green light. However, it was only his remnant shadow. The fact was that Shi Mu had dashed around, and had appeared behind the man surnamed Jia at lightning speed. It had seemed as if his main body had transformed into a green silhouette as he dashed to behind that man. He then raised his arm, and shot a solid punch with his full strength. And, an overwhelming invisible force rushed out of his fist. A loud bang sound was heard. It was followed by a sound of bones being cracked. Ah! The man surnamed Jia uttered a screech in anguish as he got struck and went flying out of the ring like a scudding cloud. He then crashed to the ground with terrible force. A hole had been smashed open in his chest by Shi Mu's punch. He had been left to spout a mouthful of blood by a mere punch. Even his breathing was barely perceptible at the moment, as if he was lingering on the doorstep of death. The entire martial arts field sank into a complete silence at once. And, everyone began to gaze into Shi Mu's eyes with an indescribably appalled look on their faces. However, Shi Mu didn't say anything. He merely turned toward Manager Shi, and bowed to him with his hands clasped. Manager Shi also responded at this moment, and declared that Mu Shi had qualified for the mission. Manager Shi then gazed at Shi Mu's silhouette from behind, and sank into a deep contemplation for a while. Then, he beckoned to the blue-robed man, and whispered a few words to him. After that, he started the next match. Shi Tou, I knew that you would triumph over him. How old does that fellow think he is? He was messing about and acting like a prick in the name of seniority. He doesn't deserve to live. Cai flew over to Shi Mu in high spirits when he saw his victory. Ah, Miss Ling, I had told you that you didn't have to be worried about Shi Tou, right? Shi Tou can be compared to a stone. That man had invited disaster by overestimating his own strength. Cai's voice revealed a sense of complacency when he said such words to Lang Yutong. She stood not far from them. Shi Mu was dumbfounded to see Lang Yutong again. Brother Mu is very formidable. I must agree that an honorable person doesn't need to flaunt his true strength. Lang Yutong walked over, and said with a broad smile. Miss Lang is making fun of me. Shi Mu's voice sounded cold when he said. Miss Lang, why do you address Shi Tou as brother? Why do you do this? Can it be that you like my Shi Tou? Cai saw that Shi Mu wore a cold and detached look on his face. Therefore, he said in order to add fuel to the fire from the sidelines. Haha, this bird is very amusing. So, you are asking me this question? I naturally like him. However, he doesn't seem to like me. So, what means do I have? She replied with a natural and generous smile. Shi Mu had never been confessed to like this. Therefore, a flush of bashfulness spread on his dark face when he heard these words. He then grabbed Cai with all his strength, and flicked on his head. Then, he turned as if he was about to take his leave. Brother Mu doesn't have to be bashful. Your little sister is a straightforward girl. She speaks everything frankly, like I just said like. So, you don't need to be shy. Her big and beautiful eyes stared at Shi Mu as she said. Also, a hint of a smile could be seen hanging on her face. Shi Mu was left speechless for a moment. He didn't know what he should say in this situation. This little sister felt a kind and amiable feeling when she first saw Brother Mu. Presumably, Brother Mu is also a hybrid of a human and a barbarian. I can feel that the aura on your body has a great similarity to mine. Lang Yutong spoke in a straightforward manner. Shi Mu's mouth went wide open in amazement as these words surfaced in his ears. And, a person's silhouette flashed across his mind at the same time. It was Feng Li. It was very rare to see a hybrid person half barbarian and half human in the eastern continent. In fact, a person of mixed blood neither had a foothold in the barbarian race nor in the human race if he was found by the people. But, this Lang Yutong was courageous enough to share her secret with Shi Mu in public. What? Miss Lang is a person of mixed blood, half barbarian and half human. Cai looked surprised as he asked this. What's the matter? Why do you have such a strange expression of amazement on your face? You're in the Western continent. The barbarians and the humans had started to intermarry almost 100 years ago here. And, their children also get acknowledgement by everyone here. Doesn't your family do the same, Shi Tou? Tisk, so it turns out that you aren't a barbarian. Why are you clad in this kind of dress then? Cai asked without thinking the matter through. How am I not a barbarian? In fact, I'm not just a barbarian, I'm a human as well. It's just that I prefer barbarians' dressing style. That's all. Don't you think that it's easier like this? She replied. Miss Ling, I'm afraid that it's not right. This Mu is indeed a barbarian. But, you and I can't travel the entire journey together. We'd better part ways here. Shi Mu grabbed Cai as he spoke. Then, he turned around, and walked away while ignoring Cai's shouting and wrangling. Interesting. Lang Yutong gazed at Shi Mu's receding silhouette as he drifted into the distance. She then muttered to herself. Chapter 326, Tracking and Conspiracy. Translator, Novel Saga Editor, Novel Saga. Shi Mu left the martial arts practicing field, and walked straight in the direction of his residence. However, a thoughtful look hung on his face while he was walking. He still needed to deal with some matters before embarking on this journey. Shi Tou, look ahead. Cai whispered at this moment. Shi Mu was taken aback. He raised his head to look in the front, and his facial expression changed. Then, he turned around, and entered a shop by the side of the street. Several grey-robed people passed through the same street after a few moments. Their appearance didn't look eye-catching, but they seemed to be in a hurry. They were led by a young woman who wore a hood on her head. Her half-exposed face was very beautiful. Shi Mu waited for these people to pass. After that, he walked out of the shop. He then gazed at the receding silhouettes of those people, and his eyes brightened. He had caught just a glimpse of them, but he was able to see everything clearly due to his exceptional eyesight. The fact was that Shi Mu had seen this young girl before. She was that girl surnamed Zhen who would always follow Luan at that time. In addition, he also had vague impressions of some of the other people among them. They were the disciples of the Eastern Dark Moon cult who had boarded gigantic vast sea boat number 1. There was only Pang Yu at first. But now, so many people have popped up. How come all of them have arrived at a small city like the peaceful Sun City? Shi Mu muttered to himself. Shi Tou, do you think that they have some problem? Cai said. Shi Mu nodded in a slow manner. Then, why don't we keep pace with them, and find out the situation? I'll lead the way, and you follow behind. Cai appeared rather thrilled. He spread his wings, and flew up. Be careful, those people must have seen you before. Shi Mu hastily said. Don't worry, I'll follow them from afar. So, they won't be able to spot me. Cai's words were brimming with confidence when he said. After that, he flew high up in the air. Shi Mu watched Cai flying in the air, and an idea sprouted in his mind. He then activated the vision-sharing link with Cai, and stepped forward to follow them. Cai's eyesight had again marked a great progress over the past year or so. Therefore, Cai could clearly see everything even though he was far behind those people. He was almost a few streets away from them. Half an hour had passed. The girl named Zhen and her group members came to a remote courtyard in the outskirts of the city, and walked straight in. There was a room at the top of a high and dilapidated tower. This tower was almost 2 streets away from that remote courtyard. Shi Mu and Cai stood in that room. They were gazing towards the courtyard through the window. These fellows look very furtive and sneaky in their movements. They are definitely trying to execute something, Cai said. His eyes were brimming with excitement at the moment. However, Shi Mu didn't look as excited as Cai. Myriads of thoughts were whirling around in his mind at the moment. He was trying to figure out the purpose of these Eastern Dark Moon cult's people. But then, his complexion changed again. A grey-robed man suddenly emerged in his field of vision. This man's entire body was wrapped in a grey robe, and even his face wasn't visible. He also walked toward the courtyard. The grey-robed person looked very cautious, and was constantly paying attention to the surrounding movements. He soon arrived in front of the courtyard's front door, and knocked on the door. A small gap split open in the door, and the grey-robed person went in. After that, the door got closed again. Shi Mu's pupil shrank since he had caught a sight of the grey-robed person's face under their hat the instant they had passed through the door. It was Pang Yu. That person is the head of the subaltar, Cai said in a low voice. Shi Mu nodded, and a ray of light flashed across his eyes. These people had gathered here one after another in a very stealthy manner. This clearly indicated that they were plotting something. Shi Tiu, don't you want to eavesdrop on these people's conversation in order to find out what they are conspiring? Cai's eyes beamed spiritedly as if he was dying to give it a shot. I hadn't expected that you like to poke your nose into others' privacy. Shi Mu was dumbfounded as he looked at Cai. Hehe, it's rare to have such good eyesight. And, it would be a pity if I didn't make efficient use of it, Cai said. Shi Mu burst into soft laughter. He was also very curious to know what the Eastern Dark Moon cult was plotting inside the room. So, he also descended the tower along with Cai, and sneaked towards the courtyard. He arrived in the vicinity of the courtyard in a few moments. Then, he directed Cai to stay at a high place nearby. He himself moved forward since he wanted to be even closer to that room. But then, he saw through Cai's vision that a person was walking out of the courtyard's room. That person was Pang Yu, and she was approaching the door. Shi Mu's heart skipped a beat. And, he hastily concealed himself. Pang Yu walked out of the door, and observed both sides with an attentive gaze. Then, she turned around and walked away. The front door opened again after a moment. And, the girl surnamed Zhen walked out of the room along with her group members. However, they had changed their attires this time. Also, they were no longer concealing their faces. They then left the courtyard, and went in the other direction. An idea bubbled up in Shi Mu's mind, and he decided to follow them once again. And so, he again went behind the girl surnamed Zhen and others. The girl surnamed Zhen and her group arrived at a bustling street after some time. Then, they started to act as if they were just wandering around. They continued to loiter around for some time. They were drifting from one place to another in an aimless manner. But, Shi Mu still continued to follow them. He had trailed them for around 2 or 3 hours. And, the color of the sky had darkened by now. The girl surnamed Zhen and her companion finally entered a large restaurant at this time. They were then led upstairs by a waiter. Shi Mu's eyes flickered. He asked Cai to stay outside, and he himself slowly walked into the restaurant. "Respected guest, please come in. What would you like to order?" Another waiter came over, and greeted him. "Take me to a private room. It's too noisy here." Shi Mu shot a glance at the first floor's lobby, and said in a faint voice. Simultaneously, he threw a silver coin to the waiter. "Okay, please come upstairs," the waiter was delighted. He then led Shi Mu upstairs in a courteous manner. A group of people had just come to this restaurant. They were being led by a beautiful woman. "Which box did they take?" Shi Mu asked. Simultaneously, he gave a brief description of the clothing of the girl surnamed Zhen. The waiter was struck dumb. He turned around, and glanced at Shi Mu. Shi Mu flicked his finger, and shot something. And, a fire attribute spirit stone darted out of his hand. It streaked a red light across, and fell in the waiter's hand. The waiter was merely an ordinary barbarian man, but he had been working in this city for a long time. So, he was naturally aware of the value of a spirit stone. Therefore, his face brightened with a hint of exultation, and he received the spirit stone. "They are in a room on the 3rd floor, the waiter said in a low voice. "Take me to the nearest room," Shi Mu instructed him. The waiter nodded, and ushered him to the 3rd floor. Then, they passed through a corridor, and arrived in front of a peaceful room. "Dear guest, please come inside." The waiter's eyes turned toward the next room, and made a meaningful glance while inviting Shi Mu in. "Get some special dishes and drink." Shi Mu understood his signal and responded accordingly. The waiter complied, and took his leave. Shi Mu walked into the room, and closed the door. Then, he bent his ear, and tried to listen attentively. He listened for a moment, and his brows creased. The fact was that he couldn't hear anything. It seemed as if the sound wasn't spreading from the next room. Then, a golden gleam flashed in Shi Mu's eyes, and his pupils got smeared with a golden radiance. He then tried to look into the next room. "They have set up a barrier." Shi Mu could faintly see the layer of white light that had enveloped the whole room. Shi Mu's face creased into a wry smile since he had discovered that the opposite party had laid out the barrier in a very careful manner. Shi Mu wasn't proficient in the formula magic. So, he knew that he might get caught by the opposite party if he tried to probe into it. Shi Mu's 5 senses were extraordinary, but they hadn't reached the point where they could see through the barrier. "Shi Tou, how are things there? Did you discover anything?" Shi Mu was distressed since he had found himself at the limits of his capability. But then, Cai's voice resounded in his mind at this crucial moment. Shi Mu then gave Cai a rough idea of the present situation inside. "Hurry up! Open the window, and let me get in. I have a way to resolve this problem," Cai urged. Cai's words left Shi Mu awestruck for a moment. But, he still listened to his words, and opened the window of his private room. The window opened to the outside street. Cai rushed through the window, and landed on the table. He was about to speak something when Shi Mu raised his hand, and stopped him. Shi Mu then moved closer to the front door. Cai's eyes dazzled with sparkling brilliance. He also flew over, and stood on Shi Mu's shoulder. Then, his eyes looked outside through the crack in the door. Shi Mu and Cai heard a sound of footsteps which was spreading from the walkway outside the door. Then, someone walked over, and stopped in front of the door of the next room. Shi Mu's eyes flashed. He could see through the crack in the door that 2 cyan-dressed people stood in front of the door next door. Both of them wore a mask to cover their faces. One of them was tall, while the other had a short stature. Their eyes were radiating cold light as they looked around attentively. Shi Mu immediately withdrew his gaze so as to avoid being noticed by the opposite party. He realized that these 2 were Xian warriors judging by the aura that they were emanating. He could also tell that they were barbarians based on their aura. The tall person knocked on the door. The door opened after a moment, and the 2 walked in. Shi Mu's eyes flickered. He then walked back to the table, and sat down. "Shi Tou, it seems that these fellows are plotting a wicked scheme," Cai said. The white feather on Cai's head flashed the next moment, and 2 streaks of white light emerged in his eyes. He then looked toward the room next door. A gleam of pleasantly surprised look flashed through Shi Mu's eyes as he saw this scene. His vision was linked with Cai's vision at this time. So, the wall gradually became transparent in his field of vision. Simultaneously, the next room's situation also began to appear in his eyes gradually. The next room's picture became clearer in his eyes as the white light projected by Cai's eyes continued to grow brighter. The girl surnamed Zhen was talking to the tall green-robed barbarian at the moment. The 2 green-robed barbarians had taken off their masks by this time. So, their faces were visible now. Shi Mu was surprised to see that these 2 men had a rather distinctive appearance. They had thin faces and deeply sunken cheeks. The 2 were obviously not skinny, but they looked as if they were somewhat haggard. The tips of their noses were slightly curved like an eagle's hook. And, their piercing eyes gave a sense of a gruesome feeling. Shi Mu looked at them once. Then, he withdrew his vision. His eyes they fell on the lips of the 2 people who were talking at the moment. Shi Mu had studied the lip language even before he had attained exceptionally good eyesight. "Some of our people have sneaked into the escort team. We'll contact you ahead of time, the girl surnamed Zhen said. Our Wing Crane tribe has undertaken the mission. And, we'll obviously keep our promise. So, you can rest assured, the tall green-robed barbarian proudly said. Then, the best deal will be if both parties divide the share into 50-50 ratio after the success of this mission, the girl surnamed Zhen said. The tall barbarian's face revealed a hint of happiness as he heard these words, and he gave her a nod. Then, let's execute everything according to the plan, the girl surnamed Zhen stood up, turned around, and said to the other people behind her, a few of you will follow Wei Du's team from now on. Yes, the people complied in unison. The girl surnamed Zhen waved her hand, and shot a white light. Then, a light shone on the wall, and the layer of white barrier dissipated. She then opened the door, and stepped out. A few moments later, the two green-robed barbarians once again covered their faces. They then walked out of the room along with a few subordinates of the girl surnamed Zhen. In the adjacent room, the white light in Cai's eyes finally dissipated. Cai's facial expression looked a bit tired and dispirited. Shi Mu bent his finger, and flicked out a pure fire attribute real qi. It submerged in Cai's body, and his drained energy suddenly got recovered to some extent. Shi Tou, are we still going to follow them? Cai asked. There's no need for that. Shi Mu shook his head. He then turned his hand, and took out a thick ancient book. Then, he started to flip through its pages at a rapid pace. Wing Crane Tribe. Vicious barbarian, as expected, Shi Mu murmured. He had spent plenty of spirit stones to purchase this book during this period of time. The peculiar habits and characteristics of each barbarian tribe of the Western continent as well as their residential areas were recorded in this book. The Wing Crane tribe was a medium-sized tribe of the barbarian race. And, the beast souls that they used to seal in their bodies were of flying-class demon beasts. Therefore, most of the barbarian people in this tribe were able to grow wings and fly after undergoing totem body transformation. Consequently, they were considered very special in the barbarian race. However, the Wing Crane tribe was also famous. In fact, they had an even greater feature. And, this feature made them extremely malicious and vicious. It was said that they would often plunder people using their advantage of having wings. And, this habit had stained their reputation in the community. Therefore, each big barbarian tribe had started to stay as far as possible from them. Chapter 327, Floating Clouds Vehicle. Translator, Novel Saga Editor, Novel Saga. There was a glimmer of hesitation in Shi Mu's eyes. The sudden appearance of the girl surnamed Zhen, a secret meeting with Pang Yu, the involvement of the Wing Crane tribe's people, and the content of the conversation that had happened just now, the outline of the conspiracy gradually became vivid in his mind once all of these things were linked together. Cai stuck out his head, and looked toward Shi Mu's hands with curiosity. His eyes fell on some small and densely packed letters on a page of the book that Shi Mu held, and he issued a groan. Hey, Shi Mu, don't try to figure out everything on your own and keep your mouth zipped. I'm still confused, Cai exclaimed in a discontented tone. Shi Mu received the book, and gave him a brief recount of the conjecture that he had formed after linking all the crucial points. The Eastern Dark Moon cult's fellows are so daring, Cai said in astonishment. This isn't a trivial matter. This situation is equivalent to undertaking the task of exterminating both the Heavenly Wu Chamber of Commerce and the barbarian race at the same time. It seems that Luan is going overboard this time, Shi Mu said. A strange light gleamed in Shi Mu's eyes. The fact was that it was just a temporary plan to follow those people. But, he had never imagined that his investigation would end up discovering such significant information. A secret plan is gradually taking shape under the name of this escort mission. So, are we still setting out with them? Cai asked. It's not a big issue. Whatever the Eastern Dark Moon cult is scheming doesn't concern us. We'll borrow the power of the Heavenly Wu Chamber of Commerce to get away from the peaceful Sun City's scope first. Afterwards, we'll seize the opportunity to slip away from the team without them noticing, Shi Mu said. That's a good idea. Cai nodded. Shi Mu then shot a glance at Cai's eyes. He already knew that Cai's eyesight could see through objects. But, he hadn't expected that his eyes could even penetrate through such a thick wall. A wall is not a big deal for me. I'm just waiting to make a breakthrough to the three-feather realm. My eyesight will again make a tremendous progress at that point. After that, even seeing 100 feet deep into the ground won't be a big issue. So, seeing through an insignificant wall like this one will be a piece of cake. Cai's voice was filled with pride as he said. Shi Mu felt amazed on hearing these words. However, he knew that the stronger Cai's ability would be, the better it would be for Cai's master. So, he was obviously happy to see it happen. One thing is certain: no matter what you say, this ability consumes a large amount of your energy. So, you must restore your strength first. He took out a water attribute spirit stone, and passed it to Cai. Cai had been eating water attribute spirit stones these days. He stretched his neck, and held the spirit stone in his mouth. Then, he swallowed it down. Half an hour later, Shi Mu left the restaurant, and returned to his residence. Wait a moment. There's someone inside. He was not far from the courtyard when Cai suddenly spoke up. Shi Mu's complexion changed. Meanwhile, Cai flapped his wings, and flew up in the air. His vision was linked with Shi Mu's. Therefore, the courtyard's situation appeared in Shi Mu's eyes in a very vivid manner. A green-robed young girl was walking in the courtyard. She was Lang Yutong from before. How could she possibly appear here? Shi Mu's complexion changed again. But then, a thought streaked across his mind, and he decided that he shouldn't reveal himself to her. So, he moved to one side, and hid there. He then observed the girl silently through Cai's field of vision. Haha, I can see that this girl has taken a fancy to you, so much so that she has even found your residence. Cai's teasing voice resounded in Shi Mu's mind. Shut up, and keep an eye on her. But, don't get caught by her, Shi Mu said. They saw that Lang Yutong was walking back and forth in each room. It seemed as if she was looking for something. She stopped over for a moment in front of the ruins of a certain room that Shi Mu had smashed in the past while testing out his cultivation art. She then spent the rest of the time in the stone room that had been properly closed up by Shi Mu beforehand. However, Shi Mu was usually very responsible when it came to these matters. Shi Mu would always carry everything on his body. He was unlikely to leave any trace behind in this kind of temporary residence. The basement's exit happened to exist in that stone room. However, even that had been concealed by him with all kinds of camouflages. Therefore, this woman might not be able to find it. Lang Yutong indeed looked around for a while in that stone room, but ended up empty-handed and eventually returned. She then walked out, and stood in the courtyard for a moment. Her brows were wrinkled as if she was contemplating something. A long time passed like this. She then swept her gaze around once. Then, she turned around and jumped out of the courtyard in a vertical position. She then walked away, and soon disappeared into the distance. Shi Mu came out of his hiding place when he saw Lang Yutong leaving. He gazed at her moving far away, and his brow slightly wrinkled. He couldn't help but recall some of the magic techniques that this woman had previously displayed in the ring. It seemed that those techniques had stemmed from the Dark Moon cult. He revealed a thoughtful look on his face as this thought crossed his mind. 10 days passed in the blink of an eye. Shi Mu walked out of the room's door at this moment. He was dressed in a barbarian cloth from top to bottom. He had also put on a scarf on his head, and this had covered most of his face. Shi Tou, why are you dressed like this today? Cai asked. Idiot, don't forget that those people will have their attention fixated on the escorting team of the Heavenly Wu Chamber of Commerce. So, we'll obviously need to take precautions, Shi Mu replied. Cai was dumbfounded to hear his reply. He then said oh as if he had grasped the situation. All those people in Pang Yu's group must have seen you. So, I think you shouldn't follow me, Shi Mu thought something for a moment. He then said again. Cai understood, and gave him a nod. He then fluttered his wings, and flew away. Shi Mu locked the door of his house. He then looked toward the courtyard, and let out a sigh inwardly. Shi Mu had been constantly wandering around various parts of the world due to all sort of reasons ever since he had set his foot out of the small fishing village. He had even traveled such a long distance from his motherland, the eastern continent, to the western continent. He had also gone through the hardships of living in the wilderness over this period of time. But, it was probably the first time that he had been able to stay at one place for a long time. It was indeed rare for him to have such an auspicious opportunity, to stay in a city peacefully for so long. The time to leave this city had finally arrived. But, he was somewhat reluctant to part with it. Moreover, he hadn't even taken down the fire-filled magic array that was arranged in the underground cavern. He had only sealed the entrance to the cavern in a proper way since he figured that he might possibly get an opportunity to return to this place someday. A string of such thoughts rolled in his mind for a moment. After that, he took a look at the courtyard, and walked towards the Heavenly Wu Gems Pavilion. A while later, at the entrance of the Heavenly Wu Gems Pavilion, several people had already gathered here. 30 Xian-Tian martial warriors and 10 star-ranked magicians had been selected on that day. And, most of them had already converged here by now. Lang Yutong could also be seen in the crowd. In addition, some other people could also be seen here apart from the finalists. They had to be the employees of the Heavenly Wu Chamber of Commerce. Brother Mu, Lang Yutong saw that Shi Mu had finally showed up here. So, she walked over to him with a smile on her face. Miss Ling, you've arrived so soon, a strange gleam flashed through the depths of Shi Mu's eyes as he said. It's too boring to stay idle. So, I came over a bit early, Lang Yutong cracked into a chuckle. Can it be that Miss Lang doesn't belong to the peaceful Sun City? Have you also come from outside? Shi Mu asked. Yes. I had initially planned to stay over in this city for a while. However, I hadn't thought that I would get trapped here for so long, Lang Yutong replied. The two people stood to one side, and were absorbed in a casual conversation. But, this was strange enough to attract the attention of the surrounding people toward them. The young barbarian men were especially looking at them again and again. Moreover, there were many people who were casting evil looks at Shi Mu out of jealousy. However, these people didn't dare to step forward and provoke Shi Mu. And, that was because they had already witnessed his astonishing strength in the ring some days ago. A dozen or more people arrived at the venue one by one with the passage of time. Eventually, almost all 40 selected escorts had reached the meeting place. A sound of footsteps was heard at this time. Then, a group of green-robed people walked over from afar. The man who was walking in the forefront seemed to be in his 30s. He was sending forth a formidable aura. He was apparently an earth-ranked powerhouse. This person had a thin stature, but he still gave off a sense of inexhaustible strength. The pedestrians were far into the distance. But, they pulled the attention of Shi Mu and other surrounding people. And, the people turned to look in their direction one after another. Shi Mu's complexion slightly changed as his eyes drew towards the attires of these people. Ling Chu! Lang Yutong exclaimed in a soft voice. She stood beside Shi Mu at the moment. Do you know this person? Shi Mu stared at her. Yes, his name is Ling Chu. He is the top high-ranked military officer of the city Lord Yukan. He's an earth-ranked warrior. I've also heard that this batch of goods the Heavenly Wu Chamber of Commerce is sending out has been entrusted by the city Lord Yukan. I was initially doubtful about this information. But, it seems true since Ling Chu has also shown up here, Lang Yutong explained. Shi Mu's eyes flashed. He couldn't help but think of the conspiracy that he had discovered a few days ago. That girl surnamed Zhen and the other people were probably aiming at Yukan's batch of goods. Hehe, brother Ling Chu, please come in. Heavenly Wu Gem's pavilion's manager Shi walked out, and gave him a warm welcome. However, Ling Chu's face revealed a cold and detached attitude toward him. He simply clasped his hands in a casual manner in response to Manager Shi's warm and passionate welcome. But, Manager Shi didn't seem to care much about it. Instead, he ushered this group of people into the store. The emergence of Ling Chu filled the hearts of many surrounding people with a sense of relief. After all, they had seen that an Earth-ranked powerhouse was going travel with them. And, this indicated that their security was even more assured. Also, their faces got suffused with a hint of blissful look when they thought of the reward they would be offered for undertaking this task. So, they started to discuss some random matters in a relaxed manner. But, Lang Yutong didn't look as relaxed as other people. On the contrary, her brows looked slightly creased. "Miss Ling, what's the matter?" Shi Mu asked. "Nothing, I just feel that this mission isn't as simple as it seems to be," she replied. "Why does Miss Lang think so?" Shi Mu's brows snapped into a frown when he heard her reply. In fact, a gleam of surprised look flashed through his eyes as he asked. "I've heard that the Heavenly Wu Chamber of Commerce has transferred a moon-ranked magician from some other place to take charge of this escorting mission. But, why would the Heavenly Wu Chamber of Commerce do so if there isn't any special danger lingering outside?" Lang Yutong said. Shi Mu's eyes flickered. This woman Lang Yutong seemed like a carefree kind of a person. But, the fact was that she was rather very refined in her rough way. As for why Heavenly Wu Chamber of Commerce had also summoned a moon-ranked magician from elsewhere, it was clear that they had done so to be fully prepared beforehand. Could it be that they had also received the intelligence of lurking danger on the way? "By the way, Brother Mu may come to protect this weak girl if we come across any dangerous situation en route." Lang Yutong received her previously cautious look, and said to Shi Mu with her sparkling eyes. "It seems that Miss Lang is cracking jokes. You're no damsel in distress. Perhaps, I would instead need you to protect me when the time comes." Shi Mu burst out laughing as he responded. Lang Yutong pursed up her lips and cast a glance at Shi Mu. Her expressions gave off a different kind of flirtatious vibe. A few people were still gazing at her. Her expressions suddenly set their hearts on fire, and made their heartbeats become a lot faster. Suddenly, a woo-woo-like buzzing sound spread from the Heavenly Wu Gem's pavilion. Then, a large vehicle galloped out of the store. It was 20 or 30 feet in width and 100 or more feet in length. The vehicle was piled up with lots of things. And, all those bulging things were covered with a layer of black cloth so that no one could see inside. An idea dawned upon Shi Mu as he saw the covered goods. And, he immediately released a wisp of his spirit sense to explore them. However, his spirit sense was flicked off as soon as it came in contact with the black cloth. Shi Mu's eyes slightly narrowed as he noticed this. This vehicle was followed by another vehicle. This one had also floated out of the Heavenly Wu Gem's pavilion. Soon, there were altogether 8 such vehicles at the entrance to the store. Shi Mu looked at these large vehicles with a gleam of amazement in his eyes. The wheels of these vehicles were half a foot above the ground. The vehicle was floating in the air. In addition, the wheels as well as the surface of these vehicles were engraved with a large array of patterns and formulas. Can it be that Brother Mu hasn't seen such a floating clouds vehicle before? Lang Yutong asked. No, this Mu has always lived in the tribe before arriving here. So, I haven't become familiar with various aspects of the world. Therefore, I request Miss Lang to enlighten me in this regard. I wonder what principle has been used that has allowed this big vehicle to float in midair. Can it be that those magic charms are somehow related to this? Shi Mu fired a couple of questions. Brother Mu's eyes are pretty sharp. Yes, you've made a correct guess. Those magic formulas are engraved on the surface of the vehicle so that they can absorb the air and form a kind of buoyancy. This allows this big vehicle to float in the air with great ease. Nothing can affect this big vehicle's movement, whether it's craggy and uneven ground, or having to pass over mountain ranges, Lang Yutong explained. Chapter 328, Reunited Abroad. Translator, Novel Saga Editor, Novel Saga. So, that's how it is. Shi Mu nodded in a thoughtful manner, and said after a moment. The value of this kind of a floating cloud carriage is considerably high. Therefore, only the Heavenly Wu Chamber of Commerce and other rich and powerful forces have the ability to build a batch of them. This carriage can undoubtedly speed up many trips. Perhaps, this is one of the reasons why City Lord Yukin has chosen the Heavenly Wu Chamber of Commerce for this mission, Lang Yutong said. After that, two groups of people also walked out of the store behind the fleet of carriages. One of the groups was composed of a few subordinates of the City Lord, and was being led by Ling Chu. The other group was comprised of the guards of the Heavenly Wu Chamber of Commerce. The leader of this group was a masked maiden in white robes. She held a jasper magic stick in her hand. Her graceful and exquisite figure was adding charm to her personality. Moreover, she had beautiful eyes which looked sharp and nimble. Her face was hidden beneath the mask. But, her conspicuous and lovely appearance was still visible to the people through her graceful movement. One of the bodyguards outside saw this girl, and his eyes brightened up. He drew in a breath gently while standing in the same place. But, the sound he issued was rather loud. Even Ling Chu's eyes often got pulled toward the white-robed maiden, and a faint fervent flame would flicker in them as a result. The white-robed girl had noticed this, and her brows had slightly creased as a result. Also, a trace of inconceivable and disgusted look would flash through her eyes from time to time. It seems that this woman is that moon-ranked magician, Lang Yutong sized up the white-robed maiden and said. She then waited for a moment, but didn't get any response from Shi Mu. So, she turned her head, and took a look at Shi Mu. Shi Mu appeared a little lost in some thought at the moment. In addition, he was also staring blankly at that white-robed girl like the other people. Lang Yutong's elegant eyebrows creased as she took notice of Shi Mu's facial expression. Simultaneously, the hint of a resentful look peeped through her eyes. Shi Mu took a deep breath, and his facial expression returned to normal. However, the expression in his eyes looked somewhat stirred up after having seen this maiden. The fact was that he had recognized this white-robed young girl at a glance due to his extraordinary eyesight even though her face was covered. This girl wasn't someone else. She was the same person Shi Mu had persistently been looking for this entire time, Zhongxiu. A glimmer of light flashed in Shi Mu's eyes, and innumerable thoughts instantly bubbled up in his mind. He immediately moved several steps back, and stood in the end of the crowd. Lang Yutong saw his action, and a perplexed look emerged in her eyes. But, she didn't ask anything. She instead turned her head, and looked at that white-robed girl up and down a few times. It seemed as if she was comparing herself with that white-robed maiden. Shi Mu looked at Zhongxiu from afar, and his thoughts got stirred up. He hadn't expected even in his dreams that he would run into her in the Western continent, a foreign land. He tried to calm his undulating mind. But, he couldn't refrain from thinking of the reasons that would have paved the way to the Western continent for Zhongxiu. Moreover, it also seemed that she was now a member of the Heavenly Wu Chamber of Commerce. Shi Mu's brows wrinkled, and a hint of suspicion emerged in his heart. It was obvious that Zhongxiu was a part of the Heavenly Wu Chamber of Commerce now. But, why had the Heavenly Wu Chamber of Commerce sealed up all information related to her? Furthermore, Zhongxiu was also a practitioner of both martial and magic arts like him. But, her magic art cultivation seemed to have made a sudden jump to the moon rank. In fact, she had ascended to such a degree that she had surpassed Shi Mu by a great margin. Could it be possible that she had had a fortuitous encounter during this period? Shi Mu shook his head since all these surging thoughts were a bunch of trivial matters. The thing that mattered to him the most right now was that he had finally found Zhongxiu. But, he still didn't wish to come forward and meet her at the moment. It was basically due to two reasons. The first reason was that he didn't wish to expose anything in the peaceful Sun City. And, the second reason was the things that he had previously heard during his investigation. Shi Mu wasn't clear about the relationship between Zhongxiu and the Heavenly Wu Chamber of Commerce yet. But, the people of the Eastern Dark Moon cult and the vicious barbarian tribe were somehow associated with the escorting mission. So, this mission was naturally going to be filled with lurking dangers and unexpected crises en route. Shi Mu couldn't just watch from the sidelines now that Zhongxiu was also involved in this matter. The old man surnamed Wu walked out of the store behind the two teams. "Elder Zhong, this is going to be a long journey. But, I'm entrusting the entirety of it to you," the old man surnamed Wu said to Zhongxiu. Elder Wu and Miss Zhong can feel relieved since this Ling has taken charge of this trip. Zhongxiu hadn't even opened her mouth when Ling Chu took a few steps forward, and said loudly while pounding his chest with his hand. Ling Chu's face was suffused with an expression of pride and haughtiness at the moment. Also, he was gazing at Zhongxiu with a broad smile across his face. However, a sense of deliberate effort could still be seen through his smile. "Hehe, having a high-ranked military officer in this mission is naturally a blessing for us." The old man surnamed Wu was left dumbfounded for a moment. He then threw an intent look at Ling Chu once. Then, the corners of his mouth curved into a smile as he said. Shi Mu was behind the crowd at the moment. His brows wrinkled as he noticed that Ling Chu was gazing into Zhongxiu's eyes. This scene left his heart with a sense of uneasiness. However, he drew in a long and deep breath, and regained his equanimity. He then withdrew his gaze, and didn't look toward them anymore. Shi Mu knew that the spirit sense of an earth-ranked powerhouse was very sensitive. So, his hostility could have been easily detected by him. Therefore, he had retracted his vision since he didn't wish to reveal his identity at this point of time. "Thank you so much, General Ling," Zhongxiu said in a cold voice, even her facial expression looked cold. "Miss Zhong doesn't have to be formal." "It's fine, haha." Ling Chu didn't seem to notice Zhongxiu's cold approach toward him. He instead cupped his hands in obeisance and said, "It's getting late. Everyone, it would be better if you set out now," the old man surnamed Wu said. Ling Chu and Zhongxiu nodded in agreement. Simultaneously, the 40 recruited escorts walked over as they heard these words. Many people of the 40 recruited escorts were stealing a glance at Zhongxiu from time to time. But, all they could see was the pair of her eyes. Zhongxiu was a moon-ranked magician. So, she could be regarded as beyond reach for them since she was far superior to these Xian-Tian-ranked warriors. As for the star-ranked magicians, they could only hope to reach this degree. It was reasonable to say that the star-ranked magician Lang Yutong was comparatively more suitable to approach than her under this situation. Therefore, many of them soon stopped paying attention to Zhongxiu, and stuck their gazes at Lang Yutong as before. "Ladies and gentlemen, this escorting mission will be carried out under the supervision of Elder Zhong, a member of my Heavenly Wu Chamber of Commerce, and General Ling. So, you must comply with their orders on the way," Old Man Wu explained to Shi Mu and the others in a loud manner. Yes. Shi Mu and the others were also familiar with Old Man Wu's status. So, they replied in unison. "Set out." Old Man Wu issued an order. The people of the Heavenly Wu Chamber of Commerce immediately moved into action, and began to stimulate the movement of the floating cloud carriage. They arranged them in a row, and then started to advance in the direction of the city's gate. Meanwhile, Shi Mu and the other escorts dispersed, and boarded the floating cloud carriages in a systematic manner. Each carriage soon had a few people on them. Zhongxiu walked up to the last floating cloud carriage. This carriage was much smaller than the others, it was only the size of a room. In addition, no goods were loaded on it. And, even the tent was pulled up outside. "Miss Zhong, please wait for a moment," Ling Chu waved his sleeve, and a streak of blue light departed. A greenish-blue flying carriage emerged before him the next moment. Then, a pair of green bird-like wings unfurled on either side of this cart. After that, a green light flashed, and the flying carriage began to inflate at an astonishing speed. It rose to several feet in size in an instant. An exquisite set of table, chairs, and bed was arranged inside it in a very decent manner. They looked very comfortable. This green-winged flying carriage is my spirit tool. It'll be very comfortable for you. We all know that this journey is going to be long and exhausting. So, it would be better if Miss Zhong sat in my cart, Ling Chu invited her. The surrounding people couldn't help but reveal an awestruck look as they saw this greenish-blue flying carriage. Some of them even revealed an envious look on their faces. Even old man Wu's face got smeared with a look of surprise. It was very rare to see a flying spirit tool. And, this kind of large-sized flying carriage was considered even more precious and rare. Ling Chu felt deeply contented in his heart as he sensed the surrounding people's gazes. He then looked at Zhongxiu with a smiling face. It isn't necessary. This floating cloud carriage is good enough for me. Zhongxiu threw an indifferent look at Ling Chu once. Then, she turned around, and walked toward the floating cloud carriage. Ling Chu's eyes radiated a cold look, and his forehead's veins suddenly twitched in response. But then, he quickly got hold of himself. He gazed at Zhongxiu's graceful silhouette from behind in an agitated manner for a moment. Then, he let out a soft groan. And jumped into his flying carriage. The greenish-blue flying carriage slowly started to move forward when the heat rose to the maximum limit. Old Man Wu stared at the fleet of carriages as they drifted far into the distance, and his brows slightly creased. He couldn't help but let out a sigh. "Elder Wu, what's the matter?" Manager Shi asked. He had been standing beside him the entire time. "I don't know why, but I can't shake off this sense of uneasiness that had emerged in my heart a few days ago. In fact, my heart always seems to be shrouded with a kind of premonition. This trip wouldn't go smoothly," Elder Wu replied. "Elder Wu, you are overthinking this matter. We have elders like Elder Zhong and Ling Chu by our side to supervise this mission. They would definitely find out a way to deal with any difficult situation that they might encounter on the way. So, there shouldn't be any problem," Manager Shi reassured him. "I hope so," Elder Wu said. Shi Mu was seated in the second-last floating cloud carriage. There were several other people in the same cart. This included Lang Yutong and a purple-haired young man. Shi Mu turned around, and glanced at the last floating cloud cart. However, Zhongxiu had long got into the cart by now. "Hehe, it looks like Brother Mu has also taken a fancy to that Elder Zhong. Unfortunately, she's a moon-ranked magician. So, she's unlikely to pay attention to insignificant people like us," Lang Yutong said when she saw Shi Mu's action. But, her voice was permeated with a hint of jealousy. Shi Mu showed a faint smile in response. He then turned his head, and didn't say anything afterwards. He also pulled the brim of his hat down a bit. The majestic fleet arrived at the city gate in no time. The news pertaining to the Heavenly Wu Chamber of Commerce and their escorting of goods had long spread throughout the city. It had aroused the curiosity of many people, and had made them come to watch the fleet departing. Shi Mu lowered his head, and remained silent. The fleet didn't undergo any inspection process, and went straight out of the city due to Ling Chu's presence. Then, the fleet moved toward the west. Shi Mu felt a great relief in his heart as soon as they floated out of the city. He then looked back, and saw that they were gradually getting further away from the peaceful Sun City. He knew that he might not get a chance to return to this city again if everything went well. "Everyone, we are now out of the city. And, we aren't far from the place where the demon race's patrol teams have been pacing back and forth for so long. So, everyone boost up your spirit." Ling Chu's voice spread from the greenish-blue flying carriage at this time. Everyone suddenly felt a surge of excitement in their hearts, and they looked around with a vigilant look on their faces. Shi Mu first took a breath in a slow manner. Then, he swept his attentive gaze over the surrounding area. There were still a large number of demon beasts of Python demon race outside the city. In addition, he could also sense the presence of an earth-ranked demon beast in the area. The mist hadn't completely dispersed yet since it was early in the morning. Therefore, their field of vision was being greatly obstructed by the mist. The fleet of carriages slowly moved ahead while concealing its tracks. But, it was natural that such a large and overbearing fleet couldn't escape the demon race's exploration range. Shi Mu made use of his vision-sharing ability, and tried to examine the frontal situation. And, the scope within a radius of a few miles immediately became crystal clear in his field of vision as a result. Even the layer of mist failed to obstruct his vision. The fleet had barely proceeded 20 or 30 miles away from the city when a pale golden gleam flashed in Shi Mu's eyes. The fact was that a large number of demon beasts had suddenly emerged in his shared field of vision. There were probably hundreds of various kinds of demon beasts in the front. "Brother Mu, what did you observe?" Lang Yutong was sharp and sensitive. She had immediately sensed a little change in Shi Mu's aura. "So," she asked. Her voice had hardly faded when Ling Chu's voice spread from the flying carriage. "Everyone stop! Be prepared for battle!" Ling Chu's silhouette appeared in front of the fleet with a swish sound. Simultaneously, a white silhouette flew out of the last floating cart, and stood alongside Ling Chu. A rumbling sound of footsteps burst out of the mist in front of them. Then, countless silhouettes of huge demon beasts floated out of the mist after a few breaths. It seemed that they were hundreds in number. Lang Yutong looked at Shi Mu with a flabbergasted look on her face. Even the purple-haired youth on their carriage also cast an astounded glance at Shi Mu. A big man flew out of the crowd of hundreds of demon beasts, and stood in front of them. He wore a purplish-black long gown, and there was a triangle-shaped purple pattern in the space between his eyebrows. He was sending forth a very intense spiritual pressure. He was an earth-ranked demon beast. Chapter 329, Defuses the Crisis. Translator, Novel Saga Editor, Novel Saga. What made the evil demon dare to block my fleet? You are indeed very courageous. But, do you know who we are? Ling Chu shot a glance at Zhongxiu who stood beside him. Then, he stuck out his chest, and shouted in a cold voice. "Humph! Who is in charge of you all? There is an order from Senior Ao Kui for you. Those who want to step out of the city must undergo our investigation process so that we can find out the culprit that has killed our senior Red Ring. However, all of you shall be killed right here without any exception if you dare to reject our inspection process," the big man in purplish-black robe said. Ling Chu was enraged by these words. He was about to speak something when Zhongxiu's elegant pupils flashed, and her jade lips moved to say, "May I venture to ask the respected surname of our dear friend?" Her voice sounded as sweet and gentle as that of a yellow oriole. It rendered a sense of calmness to people's hearts. The purplish-black-robed man cast a glance at Zhongxiu, and was left stunned for a moment by her peerless appearance. "I'm Bai Su of the Demon Python race," the big man said. "It's nice to meet you, dear friend Bai. I don't know anything about the inspection process that Your Excellency just mentioned. Could you enlighten us about it?" Zhongxiu asked. Bai Su saw that not only was Zhongxiu exceptionally beautiful, but also she was very polite and respectful towards him. So, his facial expression somewhat loosened. He revealed a bit of hesitation at first. But then, he turned his hand, and took out a purple-colored spirit tool. This spirit tool was as big as a human's fist, a crescent moon-shaped pattern was carved on it. It was flashing a bit. The crescent moon-shaped spirit tool dazzled with a splendid purple radiance. Then, it exuded a mass of purple mist which condensed into a purple gate with one plank, and stood on the ground. "This is a rare response induction treasure of my demon race. The only thing you need to do is to pass through this gate. This gate has the ability to sense the spirits of my demon python race. This gate will naturally let you pass through it safely if you are not the one who had slaughtered our senior Red Ring," Bai Su explained. These words created a tumultuous situation among the surrounding people. Zhongxiu's elegant brows wrinkled in response. This purple crescent moon-shaped spirit tool was said to be an response induction spirit device. But, what exactly was the use of this thing? Also, would there be any adverse consequences of using it? No one here could determine these points. Everyone on board turned their gazes towards their leaders Ling Chu and Zhongxiu. It seemed as if they were waiting for the two people's responses. Shi Mu's complexion also changed, and he threw a glance at Zhongxiu. Then, he held out his hand, and grasped the hilt of his black blade. Simultaneously, a thought tumbled into his mind. He didn't wish to reveal his identity for the time being. But, he naturally wouldn't stand by with his hands folded if the opposite party tried to jeopardize Zhongxiu's actions. You want this Ling to accept your demon race's inspection process. It's simply wishful thinking. Who do you think you are? Ling Chu exploded with rage and shouted. Ling Chu had boasted extravagantly in front of Zhongxiu. So, he was unlikely to compromise now since it would make him lose his self-respect. You can die if you don't want to accept it. Bai Su's temperament was very hot and violent to begin with. However, Ling Chu's instigating words had stirred him up even more, so much so that his eyes flared up with fury. Who would die here is still uncertain. Ling Chu issued a cold snort. Then, a layer of green radiance burst forth on his body, and he darted out toward the opposite party. His silhouette looked like a green meteor as it raised an intense air explosion on the way. He dashed and arrived very close to Bai Su in an instant. Meanwhile, the green rays of light converged in Ling Chu's right fist. Then, that light took the shape of a virtual shadow of a ferocious dragon's head. It was several feet in size. Then, Ling Chu pounded his fist out with a loud rumbling sound. Bai Su's complexion slightly changed. It seemed as if he hadn't expected that Ling Chu's speed was incredibly fast. But then, Bai Su uttered a loud shout in response. Simultaneously, the long robe on his body fluttered a bit even though there was no trace of wind. Then, the purple pattern on his forehead glinted, and a palm burst out of it in a violent manner. The purple rays of light darted out of his body, and condensed into a gigantic palm. It was 70 or 80 feet in size. Then, that palm dashed forward, and collided with Ling Chu's dragon head's fist with a loud explosive sound. An earth-shattering loud sound rang out. The gigantic purple palm was torn to pieces by the impact of this collision. As for Ling Chu's fist, it enlarged in front of that earth-ranked demon beast at a terrific speed. Bai Su's complexion changed, and he uttered an infuriated shout. Then, a purple light flashed on the palm of his hand the next moment. And a layer of purple scales emerged on it. Then, his palm slammed into Ling Chu's fist in front of his body. A heavy pang sound echoed. And, the two silhouettes were flicked off by the impact of the powerful collision. Bai Su drew a few steps back under the impact of the force. Moreover, he felt a burst of stabbing pain in the hollow of his palm. He was shocked to see that the purple scales on the surface of his palm had been crushed to several pieces. Ling Chu had also received a powerful jolt, and had been sent flying a few steps backwards by the impact. His complexion also became pale as a result. The two sides appeared evenly matched judging by this wave of attacks. Therefore, both men dispelled the thought of underestimating their opponent. Bai Su had suffered a little loss in this confrontation because he wasn't adequately prepared. Therefore, his pupils turned purple with outrage. Be prepared to die. Bai Su issued a low-pitched roar, and the purple radiance on the surface of his body flared up. Then, a wisp of wild and furious aura burst out of his body. And, he took the form of a gigantic python which seemed to be soaring high in the sky. The python was 200 or 300 feet long. In addition, the triangular purple pattern on Bai Su's forehead glinted with a dazzling light. This python then stretched open its big and bloody mouth, and its massive body wildly rushed toward Ling Chu to bite him, like a long purple silk. There was a multitude of demon beasts behind him. And, they also started to issue bursts of roars. Then, they gathered, and formed a small-sized semicircular encirclement. After that, they struck a posture as if they were about to pounce at any moment. A dazzling green light flashed on Ling Chu's chest on the other side. Then, the bright radiance on his body flashed, and the magic image of a massive green python floated into appearance. The size of the python's magic image was almost the same as that of Bai Su's purple python's body. The python's magic image then dashed out as if it wanted to take the opposite party head-on. But then, a streak of white light dashed from the side, and landed between Ling Chu and Bai Su at this moment. Then, that light flashed and condensed into a round-shaped white light shield. This light shield had a radius of several feet. Wave-like translucent light was gleaming on the surface of the light shield like the surface of water. Bai Su, who had transformed into a massive purple python, pounced in front of the light shield. His speed didn't reduce a bit. A dazzling purple light shone on his forehead, and a prism-shaped purple light beam rushed out. It then smashed into the light shield with great force. The purple beam crashed into the center of the light shield with an earth-shattering loud sound. However, Bai Su couldn't have expected that the white light shield would sink inward by the impact of this blow. Then, that light shield took the shape of a ball of purple light. The white light shield had sunk only a foot inward. But, this 1 foot of distance seemed to have dispelled all offensive force of the purple light beam. The light shield suddenly radiated bright white radiance. Then, it dispersed and dissipated with a loud whistling sound. Bai Su's transformed form, the massive purple python, received a powerful jolt, and stopped all at once. Then, he turned into a big man again with a flash of purple light on his entire body. He then turned his head and looked at Zhongxiu, who stood afar with a magic stick in her hand. Bai Su's facial expression changed as his eyes fell on her. He saw a white moon-shaped shadow behind Zhongxiu's head. But, it was slowly dissipating at the moment. "Noble friend Bai, I would still request you to not rush into starting a battle. This humble girl has something to put forth." Zhongxiu received her magic stick and said. "What do you want to say?" Bai Su took a look at Zhongxiu once, and a ray of purple light flashed across his eyes. He then waved his arm after a momentary hesitation. And, the crowd of demon beasts also stopped, even though they had already taken an attacking posture behind him by now. Shi Mu was on one of the floating cloud carriages. He gazed at Zhongxiu from behind, and a hint of astonishment peeped through his eyes. They hadn't been in touch with each other over the past several years. And, he could now see that Zhongxiu's strength had progressed to an astounding extent during this period. She had become so powerful that she had resisted the attack of an earth-ranked demon beast in a convenient manner, even though that demon beast was in its transformed state. "Dear friend Bai, please take a look at this thing." Zhongxiu fished out a palm-sized bronze order token. A strange magic character had been drawn on this token with a red pen. Bai Su threw a glance at the token, and his facial expression abruptly changed. "This is the token of the Heavenly Wu Chamber of Commerce. Can you possibly be the people of the Heavenly Wu Chamber of Commerce?" Bai Su's facial expression looked confused as he asked. "Yes. This humble girl's surname is Zhong. I've been invited by the Heavenly Wu Chamber of Commerce to serve as the official guest elder. We've taken charge of escorting a batch of good to the Rising Sun City as per the request of the Peaceful Sun City's Lord, Yu Qin. Dear friend Bai, we don't have any intention to begin a battle with you here. I agree that the number of people in your team outnumbers us by far. But, you are still far from having an edge over us if you consider the level of strength." Zhongxiu continued. Bai Su's eyes flashed as he heard these words. The fact was that there were indeed a considerable number of demon beasts behind him. However, not many of them were Xian ranked. There were altogether around 60 people on Zhongxiu's side on the other hand. But, almost all of them were either Xian warriors or star-ranked magicians. In addition, there were 2 earth-ranked powerhouses in her team. Therefore, the demon beasts were bound to suffer disastrous casualties if a battle broke out between the 2 sides. Bai Su's brows twitched into a frown, and he sank into a deep contemplation. This humble woman has set foot in the peaceful Sun City a few days ago. But, I've still heard of the matter related to noble friend Red Ring's murder. As per this humble girl's knowledge, General Ling Chu was in the peaceful Sun City when friend Red Ring was killed. Also, he hasn't gone out of the city since that incident. And, I assume that the demon python race must have already investigated this matter. Moreover, this humble girl has come to the city only recently. Therefore, all these points prove that neither of us could be dear friend Red Ring's killer, Zhong Xiu said with confidence. Bai Su shot a glance at Ling Chu since he was naturally aware of this very famous earth-ranked subordinate of the Lord of the Peaceful Sun City. The Python demon race had carried out plenty of investigation over the Red Ring Python's murder over this period of time. And, Ling Chu had never been on their suspicion radar. In addition, the people behind this girl are either Xian Tian-ranked warriors or star-ranked magicians. So, I believe that they wouldn't have been able to inflict any injury on noble friend Red Ring if they had fought with him alone. Therefore, it would have been impossible for them to kill friend Red Ring. Zhong Xiu turned her head, and looked at the people behind her. Then, she put on a soft smile and said. Bai Su swept his gaze over Shi Mu and the others once. Then, a purple light flickered in his eyes, and he secretly released his spirit sense to examine these people. He sensed the aura or waves of magic power their bodies were exuding, and found that they were indeed either Xian Tian warriors or star-ranked magicians. None of them was an earth-ranked powerhouse or a moon-ranked magician. In the light of this, I can assure you that none of us can be friend Red Ring's murderer. Therefore, I request dear friend Bai to let us pass. My Heavenly Wu Chamber of Commerce has many business dealings with your noble race. And, I hope that our actions today don't interrupt this cordial relationship, Zhong Xiu said. I agree that it's impossible to have the murderer in your group. But then, what's the problem in passing through this gate? Bai Su said after a momentary consideration. Zhong Xiu's complexion darkened, and a cold look surfaced in her eyes. You want us to accept your demon race's investigation? It's absurd! Ling Chu shouted. My Heavenly Wu Chamber of Commerce's amiable disposition has always led it to prosperity and wealth. It has never wanted to hold a grudge against any forces. But, it doesn't mean that it is a coward, and is afraid of getting into trouble. We'll be left with no option but to refuse your inspection process and meet you head-on, if your Excellency continues to make things difficult for us and doesn't pay due respect to my Chamber of Commerce. However, this humble girl will certainly recount this matter to the higher authorities of the Chamber of Commerce someday in person. Zhong Xiu said faintly. A train of thoughts rushed through Bai Su's mind as he heard these words. And, he started to weigh the pros and cons. His race was indeed tied up with a lot of business transactions with the Heavenly Wu Chamber of Commerce. And, they had also gained much convenience and many benefits due to these contacts. Therefore, Ao Kui might blame him if he offended the opposite party. Bai Su was swaying in the tide of such thoughts. Meanwhile, the green magic image of the gigantic python behind Ling Chu flashed. Then, it raised its head, and issued a shrill whistling sound. Simultaneously, Zhong Xiu slowly lifted her wand, and a white radiance emerged on its surface. Bai Su's facial expression changed as the two wisps of overwhelming and imposing pressure fell upon him. He could naturally withstand this force with great ease judging from his strength. However, the multitude of demon beats behind him couldn't refrain from exposing a trace of fear in their eyes. Some of them even drew back slowly. Well, you are allowed to pass through us today only for the sake of the Honorable Heavenly Wu Chamber of Commerce, Bai Su waved his hand as he said. The demon beasts that had formed a semicircular encirclement started to recede toward either side to make way for the fleet. Many thanks for this, dear friend Bai. Zhong Xiu's face showed a trace of a smile as she said. Simultaneously, she received her magic stick. Ling Chu let out a cold snort, and put away his long green spear. Then, the fleet slowly cut its way through the demon beast's territory, and drifted into the mist ahead. It gradually disappeared amid the billowing mist. Chapter 330, Flaming Ice Crystal. Translator, Novel Saga Editor, Novel Saga. General Ling, it can't be said whether these demon beasts have set up follow-up ambushes ahead or not. I suggest that the two of us should keep watch on the surrounding area, one in the front and one in the rear, Zhongxiu said a few words to Ling Chu. Then, she flew to the end of the fleet like a flash of light. Ling Chu's face revealed an indifferent look as if he didn't take her advice seriously. However, he still stimulated the green-winged flying carriage, and flew to the foremost part of the fleet. After that, he released his spirit sense in all directions. The fleet continued to move forward in an uninterrupted manner, and drifted almost 20 or 30 miles further. The sun had ascended high up in the sky at this moment. So, the mist in the surrounding air had started to dissipate under the direct sunlight. Consequently, the field of vision had gradually become wide and open for these people. The fleet had left the scope of the peaceful Sun City by this time. And, this had left everyone in the team to feel very relieved. Shi Mu also heaved a sigh of relief. His stiff body also slowly loosened a bit. Brother Mu, you appeared to be a bit nervous just now, Lang Yutong looked at Shi Mu, and her beautiful eyes flickered as she said. It obviously wouldn't have been an easy thing to wage a life and death battle against those demon beasts. So, being nervous in such a situation is just a natural thing, Shi Mu replied in a casual manner. Oh, is it truly the case? She clearly didn't believe him. Of course it is. What other reason could it be? Shi Mu said with a soft chuckle. Let it be. I shouldn't have asked. By the way, I had noticed that Brother Mu had discovered the presence of those demon beasts even before Ling Chu. This had indeed come as a great surprise to this young girl. Lang Yutong looked at Shi Mu with glittering eyes. He, this Mu was born with extraordinary eyesight. So, I can see through the mist. That's all. This was the reason why I found some clues ahead of time, Shi Mu replied. Humph. The words you just said seem only partly true. You don't seem frank to me with your words, Lang Yutong groaned. Shi Mu chuckled loudly in response, but a non-committal look peeped through his face. However, I like this feature of yours. The corners of Lang Yutong's mouth curled upwards as she said. Shi Mu was rendered speechless by her words. But then, he turned his head to other side, and sat down in meditation with his legs crossed. The afterglow of the setting sun seemed to have smeared the horizon with a golden color. Zhongxiu and her team had flown thousands of miles away from the peaceful Sun City by now. Half a month had passed by this time. The scenery along the sides of the road was continuously changing. Simultaneously, the field of vision in the front was gradually broadening. The originally determined itinerary made it seem that there was still a month or so of journey left to reach the rising Sun City. Meanwhile, flocks of demon beasts would often show up in the course of the journey. And, they would obviously cast their covetous eyes on the goods that these people were escorting. But, most of those beasts were merely Xian-Tian-ranked demon beasts. It was not a big problem for the Xian-Tian warriors and star-ranked magicians to cope with these demon beasts as long as they weren't challenged by earth-ranked or even higher-ranked demon beasts. In fact, these people didn't need the support of Ling Chu and Zhongxiu to deal with the low-ranked demon beasts. They would rush forward whilst outdoing one another, and would slaughter the demon beasts that would try to obstruct their way. And, Ling Chu's announcement was the reason why a competitive feeling had been stirred up among these people. After all, he had declared that whoever would kill a demon beast would be allowed to keep its materials. However, these people had encountered an ambush of a group of pangolin demon beasts when they had been passing through a valley. The leader of that group was an earth-ranked primary stage pangolin. That beast had kept Ling Chu and Zhongxiu engaged for a while since it had the advantage of the terrain. However, the two had still succeeded in driving away the opposite party in the end. However, 3 Xian-Tian totem warriors had been inadvertently pierced by those swift pangolins during the confrontation. And then, they had died on the scene. Therefore, everyone's idle mind had tightened again after the experience of this battle. Zhong Xiu would usually spend her time in the last floating cloud carriage apart from confronting the enemy every now and then. She would sit there with her legs crossed in meditation. And this would stabilize the formation of the entire fleet. As for Ling Chu, he had been controlling the green-winged flying carriage this entire time. He had constantly been at the foremost part of the fleet. He had noticed that Zhong Xiu had never taken a step out of the two doors the entire route. This meant that he himself had been busy in protecting and leading the escorting team. Consequently, he had become a little impatient for a while since he knew that he would hardly get any opportunity to cross her path if this continued. Ling Chu still remembered that he had been left stunned by Zhong Xiu's heavenly beauty when he had seen her for the first time. So, he was rather proud of himself that he had gotten the chance to share the path with Zhong Xiu. He had been trying to find an opportunity to get into a conversation with her throughout this journey. But, Zhong Xiu's consistent cold and indifferent attitude toward him had left him totally helpless. However, Ling Chu was reluctant to resign himself to this situation. He had been all calm and quiet on the way during the past few days. However, mighty waves of thoughts had been constantly surging in his heart. A green light slowly flew from the forefront of the team, and stopped beside the last floating cloud carriage at this moment. Then, that green light receded, and revealed a flying carriage. Everyone in the caravan was well aware of Ling Chu's intentions. However, no one could dare to say anything to him due to his powerful status, even though most of them would secretly laugh at him. However, Shi Mu's brows slightly creased as he saw this scene. He was in the second last floating cloud carriage at the moment. Brother Mu, it seems that the General Ling is going to unfurl a kind of offensive move against Elder Zhong in his persuasion. Ha ha! Lang Yutong glanced at the green-winged flying carriage from behind, and said with laughter. However, Shi Mu didn't respond to her. In fact, it seemed as if he hadn't heard anything. Miss Zhong, this rocky area is a well-known relaxation spot in the eastern region of the western continent. Verdant greenery and strange craggy rocks can be seen all over the place here. The conspicuous beauty of this place is beyond comparison under the brilliance of the setting sun. We've been forging ahead with our journey without a break these days. Even Miss Zhong hasn't taken a proper rest for so long. So, we might as well take a short break here. We'll continue our journey afterwards without much delay, Ling Chu said. Zhong Xiu appreciates your good intentions, General Ling. However, the sky is gradually getting darker. And, we are still a little distance away from the next city. So, it's essential to continue with our journey. Otherwise, we'll be left with no choice but to sleep in the desolate mountain ranges outside the city, Zhong Xiu replied in a dull voice. But, we still have ample time to take a short break. They say that more preparation may quicken the speed of doing a work. This will pump up our spirit, and that will be good to get on the road again, Ling Chu urged again. Zhong Xiu's elegant brows slightly creased, but she didn't pay any attention to him. Oh, by the way, I've been following the map these days. And, I've noticed that there are several places which fall in the territory of the demon beasts. And, those dangerous places will begin to pop up on our way after we pass through the soaring Thunder City. So, I thought that this matter needs to be discussed with Miss Zhong for the sake of the caravan's safety. I was wondering if Miss would like to move to my flying carriage in light of this. Ling Chu changed the thread of conversation, and put forth his proposal with an expression of embarrassment on his face. I think it isn't necessary. I've already done investigations of the frontal situation. Those tribes of demon beasts are already in a business relationship with my Heavenly Wu Chamber of Commerce. So, there is nothing to be anxious about. We'll continue to move forward according to our established route, Zhong Xiu said without raising her head. Ling Chu had already lowered his attitude, but he hadn't expected to be treated like this still. Therefore, he felt a surge of unpleasant feeling in his heart. However, he still suppressed his temper, and said with a smile, "This. I can see that Miss Zhong is very tired due to the constant movement of the carriage for so long. This carriage is very small and shabby. It would be better if Miss Zhong takes a rest in my carriage. My flying carriage. It's not needed. The caravan still needs General Ling in the front to lead the way ahead. So, I request you to return. Ling Chu hadn't even finished his words when Zhong Xiu jumped in, and turned down his offer. Blue veins suddenly protruded from Ling Chu's forehead when he heard her words. He clenched his fists and sucked in a deep breath in secret. General Ling, you perhaps don't know that the customs of our human race are different from that of your barbarian race. You've invited Lady Zhong to move in your flying carriage. But, shouldn't there be a thin line of respect and dignity between men and women? A green-dressed pretty woman stood beside Zhong Xiu. She finally opened her mouth and said, Xiao Wei wants to say that Lady Zhong can't go to anyone's flying carriage in such a casual manner. A blue-dressed girl chimed in. She had a baby-like face. These two women had been specially assigned by the Chamber of Commerce as Zhong Xiu's attendants. They could be also regarded as Zhong Xiu's personal confidants. Ling Chu had received a reprimand from Zhong Xiu's female attendants. But, he was still reluctant to give up. However, he didn't dare to argue further due to Zhong Xiu's status as a moon-ranked magician and a member of the Heavenly Wu Chamber of Commerce. He knew that this journey had a long way to go. And, he had plenty of time to think of a way again. So, he couldn't help but flash a complacent smile in response. Ling Chu then returned to the foremost part of the fleet. Everyone noticed that he had a defeated look on his face once again. Some of them laughed at him inwardly, while some admired Zhong Xiu in secret. However, there was one thing in common: all of these people were gloating over Lin Chu's misfortune. Shi Mu felt relieved when he saw that Zhong Xiu had finally gotten rid of this crisis. But then, Lang Yutong's jealous voice spread from the side, Brother Mu is very concerned about Elder Zhong. Why don't you step forward, and meet her? Why would Miss Lang say such a thing? Shi Mu asked in response to her question. You know in your heart that you two are acquainted with each other. Don't worry. I won't reveal your identity, she said in a teasing manner. Shi Mu heard her reply, but didn't pay attention to her anymore. Instead, he stood in a certain corner of the carriage, and gazed straight ahead. He couldn't help but let out a sigh of regret in his heart. Zhong Xiu wouldn't have renounced the path to immortality if it weren't for him. In fact, she had perhaps traveled the long distance from the Lu Shan kingdom to the ancient Xixia country in the eastern continent only because of him. However, Shi Mu had no idea why she had chosen to join the Heavenly Wu Chamber of Commerce, or come to this sinister western continent. He couldn't even imagine the degree of hardships she would have suffered on the way. He would make the utmost use of his ability in order to protect her since he had finally gotten to see her here. Shi Mu had a feeling that a fierce battle was imminent. And, that was because he knew the enemy's ulterior motives. Therefore, he felt that it would be much easier to save her if he continued to stay in the dark. What happened? Did Brother Mu find the enemy's situation again? Lang Yutong had noticed that Shi Mu was ignoring her. Still, she followed his line of sight, and asked again. Soaring Thunder City is not far from here. So, there's a possibility that we might encounter some enemies. Can it be that Miss Lang gets nervous and panics very easily? Shi Mu said. It's not like that. I'm just curious about Brother Mu's astonishing eyesight. I wonder what cultivation art Brother Mu practices that he has attained such divine powers. This little sister has been very interested in all kinds of strange cultivation arts since childhood. Lang Yutong's beautiful eyes gave him a coquettish look as she said. This Mu practices only a few insignificant arts. They can't be considered special in any respect, Shi Mu replied. You are indeed too modest. You call such a mysterious technique insignificant. I truly have no idea how many such outstanding skills and abilities are Brother Mu's forte. Well, Brother Mu, where is your spirit pet, that parrot? I haven't seen him around in a long time, Lang Yutong asked with a broad smile. Then, she started to look left and right in a curious manner. And, it seemed as if she was searching for something. He has got long wings on his body. How would I know where he is? Shi Mu gave her a quick reply. After that, he withdrew his attention from her, and sat down cross-legged. He then began to adjust his breathing. Lang Yutong twitched her mouth since she had felt that she was being purposely ignored. Shi Mu's behavior left her no other choice but to step aside and stop talking to him. 10 days passed like this. These people would continue to forge ahead all day long, and would lie low at nights. They passed through several smaller cities on the way. But, they didn't come across any further incidents. Meanwhile, a seed of jealousy had sprouted in the hearts of some barbarian men on seeing that Shi Mu had been sharing the carriage with Lang Yutong this entire time. Shi Mu obviously felt helpless when he noticed this situation. But, he was lucky that he had always kept a low profile, and hadn't revealed his identity so far. 10 days later, they were in a mountain forest one particular night. This place fell in the territory of the Wolverine race. The Wolverine demon beasts were the nocturnal type. They were accustomed to hiding in the daytime, and coming out at night. Therefore, the caravan didn't continue their journey at night in order to avoid unnecessary trouble. They set their camp here. And, it was decided that a group of 10 people would take turns on the night duty. And, this roster would change every hour. Shi Mu saw Lang Yutong sneaking out of the floating cloud carriage like a ghost at this moment. She then walked toward the nearby woods. She left the camp in such a manner that her movement didn't attract the attention of the people on night duty. Shi Mu immediately got in touch with Cai, and made him follow her as soon as he saw her leaving. After all, he had always been curious to find about this woman's true identity. Cai's shared field of vision enabled him to see that this woman was attentive, and was moving ahead in a very secretive way. She soon entered a small stone cavern in the depths of the woods. Then, she took out a white jade crystal stone, and said a few words in a low voice. The surface of the crystal stone emanated a streak of white light in response. Then, this white light started to gather before her body, and condensed into a person's silhouette. That person's silhouette immediately bent its head, and got down on its knees in a reverent manner as its eyes fell on Lang Yutong. Then, the silhouette said, "Seventh young lady, please accept this subordinate's warmest regards. Get up. You were in a hurry to see me. What's the matter?" Lang Yutong asked in a sinking voice. She seemed to have changed a lot from her previous self. Cold head is blazing with fury since the 7th miss has run away like this. This subordinate has been given a time limit to find the 7th young lady. So, this subordinate was compelled to do so. The cult's leader believes that, there's no need for 7th young lady to come and look for the flaming ice crystal on her own. It would be better if young lady. Who would think about what this young lady wants to do? How dare you butt in? Get the hell out of here right now. I won't be able to return if I can't find it, Lang Yutong said. After that, she waved her delicate hands, and the white light immediately dissipated. She then sneaked back into the carriage in a silent manner. Cold head? Flaming ice crystal. Shi Mu's brows creased as he murmured to himself.